We will turn it over to staff and team for presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Fletcher and members of the board. On September 30th of 2021, Governor Gavin Newsom signed into law a series of 8 policing reform bills, and one of those, AB 481, requires a public forum to address the funding, acquisition, and use of law enforcement equipment specified in the law as military equipment. The law also requires each law enforcement agency's governing body to adopt a written policy by ordinance in a public forum in order to continue the use of this previously acquired equipment effective May 1st, 2022. The bill requires the governing body to review the ordinance annually and for each law enforcement agency to produce a report outlining the funding, acquisition, and use of the specified equipment. With me today is Lieutenant Chris Steffen, who will provide an overview of the ordinance before you for approval today and the requirements and equipment disclosed under AB 481. Lieutenant.
Thank you, Holly. For law enforcement agencies such as the San Diego County Sheriff's Department that currently utilize equipment identified in the new law, AB 481 requires approval by the governing body for the continued use of the specific equipment no later than May 1st of 2022. The department currently owns equipment under the identified types as defined in AB 481. The listed equipment is used to respond to critical events and assist in de-escalation. The equipment increases the safety of law enforcement personnel and citizens. It allows access into difficult terrain and provides a variety of options for safe and timely resolution of critical incidents countywide. The San Diego County Board of Supervisors are requested to approve the continued use of military equipment acquired prior to January 1st of 2022 by way of ordinance. The supervisors may only approve this policy after the equipment must be shown to be necessary, that its use policy will safeguard the public, and that purchasing new equipment will be cost effective. AB 481 requires we keep an inventory of the equipment, train to operate the equipment, give the public an opportunity to question military equipment use, and report the cost of the equipment. This list could also include any other equipment as determined by a governing body or state agency to require additional oversight. I'll briefly talk about the Sheriff's SWAT team. The concept for the Special Enforcement Detail, or SED, started in 1973 as a result of sniper attacks against civilians and police officers. Members of SED are trained to handle more dangerous situations. They must be available to respond to emergency calls 24/7. The team is currently comprised of 32 deputies, including a lieutenant and 3 sergeants. Deputies must complete patrol training before they can participate in the testing process to become a member of the specialized unit. They must pass a stringent and challenging 2-week academy that is designed to test the deputy's ability to mentally and physically perform during stressful situations. After selection and assignment, Special Enforcement Detail members must meet rigorous standards of sustained physical fitness and specialized training every week to accomplish their mission. Sheriff's deputies use a variety of the items outlined as military equipment. However, most of this equipment is used by the Sheriff's Special Enforcement Detail, such as interior drones, recon robots, chemical agents, and armored vehicles for rescue missions and transportation to high-risk incidents. There was a recent incident when military equipment was used. A man threatened his mom with a machete and threatened to shoot deputies if they came inside his residence. Patrol deputies arrived at his Spring Valley home around 5:15 p.m. Special Enforcement Detail deputies arrived soon after and set a perimeter. Deputies tried to communicate with the man using the public address or PA announcements from the Bearcat. The Sheriff's Crisis Negotiation Team attempted to establish further communications via cell phone and landline. At about 11 p.m., a search warrant was signed, and deputies attempted to deliver a phone to the man to foster communication. The Crisis Negotiation Team still couldn't make contact, so a reconnaissance robot was sent inside. About 20 minutes after that, the Special Enforcement Detail sent in an interior drone. Just before 12:30 a.m., the Special Enforcement Detail deployed a flashbang outside the home in an attempt to elicit a response, and more PA announcements were given. Shortly after, chemical agents were deployed into the home. The man still refused to exit the home. Just before 1 a.m., deputies entered the home and located the man in a back bedroom. Just after 1:30 a.m., Special Enforcement Detail negotiated the man to come out of the room and placed him in custody without injury. If the policy is approved, the Sheriff's Department must submit an annual report and hold at least one well-publicized and conveniently located community engagement meeting to allow for public discussion. This annual report and community meeting will continue every year thereafter. This concludes my presentation, and I'll pass it back to Holly.
Today's request is for the Board of Supervisors to receive today's presentation related to AB 481 and request the board consider an ordinance adding a new section of the San Diego County Administrative Code relating to the sheriff's military equipment use. If the board takes actions as recommended, then on April 26th, the proposed ordinance will be brought back to the board for consideration and adoption. Chair Fletcher and members of the board, this concludes our presentation, subject to your questions.
Thank you. Let me ask the clerk to call forward our public speakers in this item.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. We have 5 requests to speak on this item, 3 in person and 2 by phone. Also note we did not receive any e-comments on this item. Any members of the public that requested to speak on item 14 by phone, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We'll begin with the in-person speakers. All the speakers are in opposition to this item. As your name is called, please come forward and stand against the east wall under the murals until it is your turn to speak. I'd like to invite forward the following individuals: Audra, Mark Dorian, and Jason Robo. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board. I'll ask you to please state your name for the audio record.
Audra. So if this was used in a way to actually protect people, I feel like it probably may be good. But when someone like Nathan says that people who are anti-vax are Nazis, it's a concern, because then it's like, are you going to use this against the people to enforce your policies, to make sure that we comply? I mean, you guys think we're terrorists, the people that are anti-vax, and kind of dissent from your agenda because we know a little bit more about them than you, or you know, and you're complicit in this whole thing, right? Yeah, Nathan, exactly. So you are complicit. You do understand what's going on and what you're doing to the people. And you want to use things like chemical agents. I mean, we know they have FEMA, housing for us, concentration camps, internment camps, whatever it is. Is this so that you guys can enforce that and make sure that the people comply with you? I mean, sure, there's times where people probably need something like this in order to enforce it, but we don't have snipers here currently, lucky for you guys. I mean, it's very sad the way that the county is going and the way that you guys want to talk about discrimination and all these things when you're discriminating against the people, I mean, Terry, you just were saying the Bible is basically hate speech. Like, that's terrifying what you guys are leading us into. And the fact that you now have military weapons that you can use against us, I mean, you realize that the people are not going to put up with this. And they don't want to bring war to the U.S. because all of the people have guns, which is what you want to take, and we'll address that in the next agenda item. But, I mean, it's terrifying.
Thank you. Final call for Mark Dorian or Jason Robo. And Chair Fletcher, we did have 2 individuals that requested to speak by phone, but I do not see those callers in the queue at this time. That concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you. Make a motion to approve the items, recommendations in this item. We have a motion by myself, second by Supervisor Desmond. Not seeing any requests from my colleagues to speak. Please vote.
That motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
We're going to go to agenda item number 15, administrative item surrounding EMS fees. I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. May I ask the clerk to call forward the speakers in this item?
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. We have 3 requests to speak on this item, 2 in person and 1 by phone. We also did not receive any e-comments on this item. For any individuals that requested to speak by phone on this item, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We'll begin with the in-person speakers. Both of the speakers are in opposition. I'd like to invite forward Audra and Jason Robo. Again, you'll have 2 minutes to address the board.
Audra, so emergency medical units, love this. So you want to recover fees related to this. So how much money did you already get to implement them? And now you want us to pay even more money for them to be used. That's the problem. Like, I mean, I need to go back and look and see how much money you've actually put into EMS and wanting them to be, you know, something normal. Let's just have emergency medical units everywhere so people just think that that's normal. Just like mental health in children is not normal, but you guys are creating that with all these trends, like you can pick what sex you want to be. Like you don't have to go with what God gave you, you can choose. And we can mutilate your genitalia if you want and destroy your chances of having children. It's all a part of the World Economic Forum plan, right, Nathan? Yep. But yet you engage with these people and you're bringing about all of these things that they want in the county because you're a puppet for Klaus. Let's implement all of that. Let's spend tons of money, and now we won't need to take more money from the people for having these in place. So I would like to take the rest of my time and dedicate it to all those who have died in the past 2 years from your agenda. Hopefully one day you acknowledge the people that have died from your implementation of all of these things.
Next speaker, please.
All right, Jason Robo. Yeah, militarizing our sheriff's department. This is the kind of thing I think Eisenhower was.
Excuse me, I'm going to ask the speaker to speak at the item. We're on agenda item 15 around EMS fees.
Oh, I missed 14. We're on EMF.
EMS, emergency medical system.
Oh, okay. Well, emergency medical systems. Well, I wonder if this encompasses the emergency that is corrupt government. Kind of curious if that might fit in the bill. I don't know.
No.
Yeah, it's just really disappointing. Pretty much you guys just, this is the front end of the corruptness that is going on in the background scene. And yeah, I don't know. I thought we were on 14, so I'm just gonna, I guess, we'll do a moment of silence for people that have died from your declared emergency. I'll also end with saying rest in peace to Frances Arson, my grandma who was killed in a nursing home for COVID policies at 97.
And Chair Fletcher, again, we did have one individual request to speak by phone, but I do not see them in the calling queue at this time. That concludes public comment on this item.
All right, we have a motion by myself, second by Supervisor Anderson. Not seeing any requests from board members to speak. Please vote.
Chair Fletcher, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
We'll go to agenda item number 16, Gun Violence Reduction Program Update and request to issue a competitive solicitation for community needs assessment. In October 2021, I was proud to bring forward this item along with Supervisor Lawson Reamer, a package of policy proposals aimed to reduce gun violence in our communities. These initiatives included banning ghost guns, creating a safe storage ordinance, directing staff to develop options for community-based gun violence prevention efforts. Today's action is our first report back on the community-based violence reduction and disruption programs. I want to thank the public safety staff, in particular Julie Geekle for leading this initiative, and of course to our community groups who have been engaged on the ground work. The tragic events we've just seen in Sacramento and Dallas underscore the critical work that remains ahead of us in doing all that we can to reduce gun violence. And we're pleased to be here today and turn it over to staff for your presentation.
Good morning again, Chair Fletcher and members of the board. Good afternoon. On October 19th, 2021, your board directed the Chief Administrative Officer to develop options for community-based gun violence reduction and disruption programs and to return to the board within 180 days. With me today is Julie Jekyll, Group Program Manager with the Public Safety Group Executive Office, who will provide an update on gun violence reduction planning efforts. Julie?
Thank you, Holly. In response to the board's direction last fall, the Public Safety Group convened a gun violence reduction working group to develop recommendations for board consideration. The working group consisted of representatives from 7 different community-based organizations that actively work in gun violence prevention, intervention, and aftercare or post-incident recovery, and 6 County of San Diego departments. All told, 18 representatives from 13 organizations participated. Members of the working group met 7 times to establish a framework for this work and to develop a proposal for your consideration. I do want to acknowledge that this initial working group included a limited number of organizations and perspectives. This initial group helped to identify some high-level challenges in this arena, which I'll speak to in a moment, but they did not identify specific strategies, solutions, or areas for investment in our communities. If your board approves the recommendation before you today, we plan to broaden participation on the working group to increase representation from diverse perspectives, both geographically and programmatically. This would include the voices of those working on issues related to gun violence prevention, which could include education and training, as well as intervention and response, and aftercare or post-incident recovery. And we also want to be representative of those providing support for different types of gun violence, such as suicide, family and domestic violence, as well as community violence. To identify individuals who are interested in moving this work forward, we would post a public notice that we are seeking applicants for the working group and would engage your board staff in publicizing this opportunity. As the working group navigated through discussions, 2 key challenges came to the forefront that ultimately became the central focus of their recommendations. The first challenge is that there is no single source that indicates where gun violence is occurring most frequently in our region, the type of gun violence, and who is most impacted by these acts of violence. The working group prioritized addressing this gap via their recommendations with the thought that once the problem or impacts are more clearly understood, then appropriate strategies to address these impacts could be developed. The recommendation of the working group is also to consider all types of gun violence as part of this project to better understand the connections between the types, which includes community gun violence, as well as suicide and domestic and family violence, so the areas of greatest impact in our communities can be addressed through this work. Second, working group members shared that even those who actively respond to acts of gun violence in our communities and provide services to those affected are often unaware of all of the agencies, organizations, and groups working in this space, especially across the full spectrum, which includes prevention, response and intervention, and aftercare. And this can and has led to missed opportunity to connect individuals to services and intervene before acts of violence occur. Working group members shared that having a platform or network that identifies agencies and organizations working in this space, including what types of gun violence they provide support for, communities they serve, and services provided, would help facilitate collaboration and coordination in our communities. Early in discussions, the working group identified 4 guiding principles that would inform their work as well as the options they brought forward. First, this work must be solution-focused, which means that actions should result in concrete assistance to those working on these issues and affected by gun violence. Second is evidence-informed, recognizing that using reliable data and research is critical to understanding who is most affected by gun violence and what factors and circumstances are contributing to violence or helping to create safety. Third, those who are frequently and directly exposed to gun violence must be involved, and collaborative action is needed from representatives from diverse sectors. And lastly, we must approach this work with the understanding that racial injustice has disproportionately impacted many communities, perpetuated poverty, and caused multi-generational harm, and actions must promote healing and minimize further harm. With this in mind, the working group centered around using a public health approach to address gun violence in our region. A public health approach includes using data to inform action, asking foundational questions to address underlying risk factors that contribute to gun violence, and emphasizes input from diverse stakeholders to address the problem. A public health approach includes 4 steps, which begins with defining and monitoring the problem, and ultimately leads to the design, implementation, and adoption of meaningful strategies, in this case, to reduce gun violence in our communities. In alignment with the public health approach, the working group outlined 2 key objectives for this initial work that is focused on defining and monitoring the problem. The first objective is to better understand how various types of gun violence impact our communities, including suicide, domestic and family, and community violence. The second is to better understand the impact, intensity, and distribution of services needed to reduce violence in communities throughout the region. To accomplish these objectives, the working group recommends that a contractor-led regional community needs assessment be conducted to gather data and feedback from the community to better understand the scope of gun violence in the region, to identify existing resources, operational strengths, and best practices, to identify gaps, challenges, and community concerns, to facilitate alliance building and support shared learning and collaboration, and to produce key findings that can be used to develop strategies for continuing gun violence reduction efforts. The assessment and analysis would be done in consultation with and considering input of community stakeholders and public safety partners. The assessment would consider qualitative data in conjunction with quantitative data to obtain a broad sense of the types of gaps in programs and services and to enhance understanding of the impact, intensity, and distribution of services needed. Findings from the community needs assessment would be included in a final report, including gaps, strengths, and challenges discovered, as well as locations where gun violence is most prevalent and opportunities to enhance gun violence reduction activities in our communities. The final report would be shared with the community and your board upon completion. At the completion of the assessment, the working group also recommends the development of a platform or network to facilitate collaboration and coordination amongst agencies and organizations working in this space. It is anticipated that it may take up to 6 months to procure a contractor to conduct a community needs assessment and another 4 to 6 months to complete the assessment. In recognition of this timeline, the working group recommends the county take the following actions while a procurement is underway to capitalize on current momentum. First, explore sources of existing data to show where and what type of gun violence has been occurring over the last 5 years. Next, continue documenting service providers, organizations, and agencies that work in gun violence prevention, intervention, and aftercare in San Diego County. And conduct research to document successes and challenges from other regions that have launched gun violence reduction efforts. And now I'll turn the presentation back over to Holly.
Thank you, Julie. Today's request includes 3 recommendations. The first recommendation is to receive and approve the recommendations of the Gun Violence Reduction Working Group. The second recommendation requests the board authorize the Director of Purchasing and Contracting to issue a competitive solicitation for a contractor to conduct a regional gun violence community needs assessment. And the third recommendation is for county staff to share the key findings report with the board upon completion of the community needs assessment. And Chair Fletcher and the board, this concludes our presentation, subject to your questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Let me ask the clerk to call forward our public speakers on this item.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. We have 9 requests to speak on this item, 5 in person and 4 by phone. Also note for the record that we received 31 e-comments. 30 of those are in favor. Any members of the public that requested to speak on item 16 by phone, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We'll begin with the in-person speakers. We'll begin with the individual in favor of this item, followed by the individuals in opposition. As your name is called, please come forward and stand against the east wall under the murals until it is your turn to speak. I'd like to invite forward Teresa Heimer, Andrew Prakash, Audra, Mark Dorian, Jason Robo, and Sarah. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board. And I'll ask you to please state your name for the audio record.
I am Therese Heimer. I serve on the Board of Directors of San Diegans for Gun Violence Prevention and was proud to be a part of the working group that helped to develop the recommendation before you today. Make a plan, then work the plan. You've heard that saying. The key to that truly being an effective approach is to make sure that good, high-quality information is used to make the plan, and that is the point of the community needs assessment proposed today. During this assessment, in addition to gathering data and best practices information, the listening that the county has already done so well through the public safety group can now be broadly expanded. We felt strongly that all types of gun violence had to be included and considered given the interwoven nature of the root causes and the overlap of some of the potential solutions. We need to hear the stories of the parents of those children we lose every year to unintentional shootings. What could have been the public information campaign that would have reached them, that would have taught them to store their firearms locked? We'd like to hear from gun owners and gun store owners about their ideas on ways to voluntarily, temporarily remove the most lethal means of suicide, the firearm, from the home of someone who is struggling with suicidal ideation. And are the ideas from the veterans community any different? And we need to hear from the family members of those killed and injured by gun violence every year in San Diego County. What mental health services and other support do they need to help them move forward with their lives, to keep them and their families from a cycle of retributive violence? And then after the data is gathered, the county needs to move quickly to develop an integrated plan to use across the region, a plan that can be worked in a methodical way for years to come, addressing the highest needs first, making sure that best practices solutions are in place, and that those that do the work get support and resources, whether from federal, state, or local funding. Thank you for voting yes to reduce gun violence.
Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Andrew Prakash. There's no tool in the world that gets more hatred than a gun in leftist America. It's not the first time our liberal leaders force us to look at the smoke while they burn American values to the ground. This is just another ploy. You're going after everything we hold dear: God, country, culture, history, the family unit, the people's right to defend themselves, men, women, and children, both born and unborn. Here's some facts that not even you can label as misinformation. A gun that can't pull its own trigger can't kill anybody. A gun is a right in America, not a privilege. Despite how you try to spin it, that's what the Second Amendment is. And that right shall not be infringed. I say it again, that right shall not be infringed. Guns keep the power with the people, which is precisely why you can't do the things they're doing in Australia and Canada. You know what'll happen if you do. And it is exactly what is stopping you from following suit with Venezuela and Cuba. The first step was to scrutinize and remove guns from the people as well. I try to reason why would American leaders who are supposed to know the law, know history, and love their nation be so opposed to guns. The answer is simple. You don't represent America's best interests, and you don't represent San Diego's best interests. Guns don't kill people. People kill people. You and I both know you don't give a damn about violence or have any regard for your own people, or you would be dealing with drugs, suicide, homelessness, to name a few. You don't need to look very deep into your lives and policies to know that you are a bunch of treasonous, godless, arrogant, self-seeking, and foolish individuals. You don't need to look very deep to see how Nathan slaps the face of the military he once served, and you don't need to look too deep to see how Nora takes advantage of the Latino community to keep her position of influence while constantly dragging them through the mud. You know what solves violence? It's not taking away guns. It's keeping God in our midst and a strong economy, which you want to destroy. Holy Spirit, I pray you move in these wicked hearts today.
Next speaker, please.
I mean, look at him. Not only did he assault me, but, I mean, for real? All right, Audra, yeah, so gun violence. Do you realize that in 24 other states, they have, they're able to carry weapons and there's less violence? And the fact that there's gun violence restraining orders. In fact, one of the people running for sheriff, John Hemmerling, is a chief prosecutor in taking people's guns. He's taken over 1,100 since 2016. All while he claims that he's never taken anybody's guns, which is funny. You're running for sheriff. People need to pay attention who's running to try and do things in this county. And the fact, how many people have actually killed themselves with guns? I mean, there's knives, there's medications, there's tons of things that, are you going to ban those as well? Is there an epidemic of suicide? No, there isn't. And people should be able to protect themselves. That's a Second Amendment right that you cannot infringe upon. So the fact that you want to make this something because then you want to come and take the people's guns so that when you can use the military to come after the people. Yeah, Nathan, pay attention. You don't even pay attention. You're the chair of the board. You won't listen to what anybody's saying. We're talking about protecting ourselves. I bet you want to protect yourself, right? I bet. Because you know what it's like to be in the military, right? And that you got to protect yourself. So what if they told you, you know what? You can't protect yourself with a gun. Someone may come up to you with one, but you can't have one. Is that a fair fight? No. And if I have to lock one up at my house and somebody comes and they try and shoot me, I don't have time to get into a safe to get myself protection against somebody. We know you don't want us to have guns, and there's a reason for that. But the fact that you're using all of these other reasons to take them from the people is ridiculous. Because like he said, it's not the guns that kill people, it's people that do. Yeah. And the policies that you guys create that. So pay attention, because the American people are not going to give up their guns so you...
Next speaker, please.
Mark Dorian, the entire concept, the assessment taking 6 or 10 months, that's a joke. Everybody knows what's wrong. The poor areas, of course, are suffering more. 30 to 40% of the economy is that the businesses, especially middle-class businesses, have been destroyed. So it's no wonder that people are struggling and some men are shooting each other to provide for their families and win the women in society. It's just a psychological fact. Fletcher knows as a Marine, literally, that you would never want to be in front of anyone attacking you with anything less than the best firearm you could have and as many bullets as it takes. And any Marine or person in the Army who's served knows that. So the idea that Newsom is giving everyone a little pop gun with a 10-round clip means that when 3 real criminals, who, by the way, like organized crime, the first day that there were 3D printed guns, I'm sure that the crime leaders just gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to the second in command and said, I want you to buy all the 3D printers possible and back up all our favorite guns, all the programs for them. They are printing them every day, all day long. They probably have a kid they're giving a pizza for lunch in the gang, and they're printing them all day long. So you're not going to stop them. When 3 of them come into your house or one of our houses to rape or pillage or do whatever else a criminal might want to do, mom and dad, they're not going to wait for mom and dad to reload before their 10-round clip runs out. So the only people that you're keeping from being defended or having guns is the poor people or regular people defending themselves, which would have a chance against real criminals with the best guns in the world entering their house. And that's just a simple fact. It's not debatable, and you know it. Of course, this is an agenda to disarm the people so you can do your...
Thank you. Your time is up. Next speaker, please.
I'm Sarah. On comment on this agenda item, we were talking about violence and a public health approach. At least that's what the presentation was over there. And in my opinion, it's a joke that this board is speaking of this. You're using words in the presentation of defining, monitoring, collaborating, assessments to understand when violence is happening, identify, facilitate, key strategy and findings. We'll find this gap. Today, up in Sacramento, a baby can be killed 7 days after it was born. It's disgusting, exactly. This society is violent. When you can kill a baby, what does it matter if you kill with a gun? Where's the difference? Where is the line, Nora, Tara, Nathan, I don't know about Jim and Joel, where do you define life? 7 days after? Abortion should be legal till age 21. I had a friend who said that. If abortion is legal now and 7 days after, why not to age 21? What does it matter that someone kills someone with a gun? Why? Why does that matter? And it doesn't matter that a baby's killed after 7 days of life. Why not all the way to the end of life? We have violence here. You guys are hypocrites. You have to know where the origins of morality starts. And to talk about violence here is a tea in a tempest, or whatever that is. Thank you.
Final call for in-person speaker, Jason Robo.
Jason Robo, yeah. Well, I think guns are the main reason that you weren't able to lock us down like Australia, and that turned into a totalitarian nightmare for anybody that pays attention or gives a shit about that concept. And yeah, this is all insanity, but as R.D. Lang said, insanity is a perfectly rational adjustment to an insane world. I thought it was interesting, too, that gun violence from police was never mentioned. When they actually have their own mental health issues that they deal with from enforcing nonsensical policies like the war on drugs, which are victimless crimes that promote the prison industrial complex, which you've done nothing to undermine, which is real savage racism, is locking people up and using them to build stuff and exporting those people to other states. And that's what California does. So you are a local feudal lord doing that kind of thing. And then, yeah, worried about the shots from guns instead of vaccine violence, so you got the whole world getting shots. That's kind of stupid. Shows paradoxical hypocrisy in this. But yeah, yet again, your shitty policies prove that you're a bunch of assholes. Yeah, I think we need a wet wipe. Don't laugh, that's illegal. We're only able to clap when they jerk themselves off in front of us at the beginning of the meeting for items that we don't even get to prepare to even know what they're gonna do. I'm gonna give a plaque away. The plaque from your teeth is probably about as useful. Anyways, I'll keep shooting off at the mouth about your bullshit, and I don't know. Yeah, I own guns. I'm sure you do. Does anybody else? I know you say the Brown Act is your shitty way of justifying that you don't have to answer my questions. I think that's hilarious. I've never seen that in there. I am curious, though, for maybe my vision board. Nathan, what kind of gun do you have if you fulfill my dream of your Twitter bird brains being blown out?
We'll now hear from those that requested to speak by phone. When it is your turn to speak, you'll be unmuted, and you will hear a recording that will tell you to begin your comments after the beep. I'll remind the callers that they should mute their TV or live video stream before they begin speaking. We'll begin with our first caller.
My name is Cornelius Bowser, Program Director of Shafat Outreach, and I support the county's gun violence reduction program strategy or proposal. I myself am a former gang member, and if it weren't for guns, I would have at least 17 friends that are still alive that were killed with firearms. So I'm also a certified community-based public safety professional. It is important that we have a comprehensive community violence strategy and not just a law enforcement response to gun violence. This gun violence reduction strategy will focus on people, places, and behaviors most at risk. The county's proposal to reduce gun violence is an approach that will be proactive. Violence should be first prevented and then interrupted when needed or deterred when possible, and high-risk population engagement is critical. This proposal seeks to get the best results in making things better, not worse. This proposal will help to identify triggers, for we know that violence leaves a predictable trail, and this plan will not only help to identify triggers, but to help reduce gun violence, but will also help us to sustain it by giving support and relief. And this plan will also offer treatment in order to bring wellness and recovery. As a community-based public safety professional, our primary goal is to prevent gun violence as it relates to gangs, to engage the community through outreach, conduct hardcore intervention, and deliver equitable services and collaborate with public safety agencies and community. Currently, we, Shafat Outreach, along with our community and public safety partners, are in the midst of our No Shots Fired Season of Peace from March 19th through April 15th, which is a part of our efforts to reduce gun violence. During this time, we have nonviolent conversations with gangs and ask them for a ceasefire. So far, there has been no gang homicide or gang-related injuries through a shooting. Thank you for hearing me and support the proposal.
Now hear from our next caller.
That's truth. Yesterday, I accurately predicted that the shooting in Sacramento would be used by the tragedy pimps. In item 16, the programs to reduce violence via guns are described as disruption programs. It's disturbing that they're using the World Government Summit and Milken Institute term disruption. Just a few days ago, the World Government Summit was talking about, quote, disrupting governments with groups such as the World Bank, CNN, the World Economic Forum, and the United Nations. And the Milken Institute had people like Anthony Fauci talking about disruption of the health system and mRNA vaccines back in 2019. FYI, the Milken Institute now speaks about all life in, quote, permanent disruption. Is permanent disruption what these supervisors have in mind for San Diego? This county program makes me wonder, where's the domestic violence reduction working group or the vehicle accident reduction working group, since more people are likely to experience and die from domestic violence or car crashes? Over 40,000 people die in and over 2 million are permanently injured in car accidents every year. Over 2.3 million people are raped or physically assaulted each year. That's all more than via guns. These supervisors don't care about victims. They just don't want Americans to own guns. They don't want Americans to be able to defend themselves against crimes like domestic violence. This item says the working group and the county decided, without any input from the public, to look at violence via guns as a public health issue. So which items do these supervisors regard as the highest public health issue? COVID, the environment, guns, racism, or jail? For fun, which one's the most racist? Which one is the next one to keep us all locked down in an eternal state of emergency?
Thank you. Now hear from the next caller.
Hi, Supervisors. Paul Henkin here. I just wanted to say that I supported comprehensive study, and oh, by the way, I hope the psychologists in the study assess you as well, and also police provocations. However, I do think it is silly and backwards to single out in the proposal before the actual data analysis. Quote, that countywide data shows that the Black/American, African-American, and Hispanic/Latino victims of homicide are more likely to be killed by a firearm than any other weapon type, unquote. A death is a death, and any death is a tragedy. And the item at issue here is death by guns in any number, whether Black, Latino, Asian, or Caucasian. Anyway, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, and Chair Fletcher, that concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you, and I appreciate the work that's going into this. You know, there's a robust debate around gun control laws, but what we're talking about here is community groups coming together to reduce the number of gun deaths in our society. talking about issues of suicide, issues of violence, issues of things that are present in our community. Appreciate the efforts included to reach out to gun owners, gun store owners, and others to figure out how, we should all be able to agree on the desire to reduce the number of gun-related deaths in our society. And so a robust effort to find and identify those strategies and implement them can only make our community safer and serve to hopefully save lives. So happy to see this come forward and happy to make a motion to approve the 3 recommendations in this. Is there a second? All right. Let me go to, we'll go to my colleagues, starting with Supervisor Desmond, and then we'll go to Vice Chair Vargas.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. Julie, thanks for the presentation, and I'd like to say, it's critically important that we have a diversity of opinions at the table. It seems to be a theme here today. I was disappointed to learn that Second Amendment rights groups were left out of the initial working group and in the discussions, and most of them advocate for gun safety. I think I heard I think I counted the number of times gun violence was referenced in the board letter. It was up to 38 times, and it was mentioned many times. Gun safety, I never heard that. So I think it's really important that we work with groups who advocate for gun safety. And have their input as well in moving forward. My district is 2,100 square miles now, and it's larger than the state of Delaware. Our residents live in very remote areas, and law enforcement can be 20, 30 minutes away. So these residents use firearms for their personal protection, but they must have their interests and concerns heard as well. So I'm glad to hear, and that you're going to, in the future working groups, you're going to include much more diverse cross-section of the county. And I also think it's critical that we have an unbiased consultant who's really focused on getting the data. Because if it looks like any agenda is being pushed, it's not going to be fruitful. It's just not going to work. Sort of like I was in gang prevention when I was working with North County Gang Task Force. It's crucial to have former gang members on that task force, because gang members might be, listen to somebody who's been through that. Whereas if you got a gun owner and somebody who is advocating for guns and gun safety, trying to press that message, I think is going to become a lot more genuine than somebody who they're suspecting is trying to take your guns away. So I think that having those groups that advocate for gun rights and things like that, having them on board and they're using their tools for gun safety, I think would be very helpful and crucial. So I'm focused on getting the data, all the data we can, and violence in any way, shape, or form should be, rooted out. I was really surprised. It was really kind of shocking. I didn't realize this statistic that you had given in the board item, that 60% of the deaths of firearms in the United States were suicides. 60%. That says a lot about our society, and we got to learn to work together and stop the divisiveness and things like that. That was just because you always hear, well, how many people are killed by guns, but then 60%, over 60%, or 60% are suicides. So it's really kind of it's a shame. But I'll be supporting collecting the data and reducing violence where we can. Let's get everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Vice Chair Vargas.
Thank you, and thank you to my colleagues for bringing this item forward. I really do appreciate that this is a data-driven approach and that it's, really going to define the root of gun violence and who it impacts the most. I also want to make sure that we caution that the data must also be examined for internal racial bias, as much as the data is likely to come from law enforcement sources. And as we know, communities of color have long been disproportionately policed. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind, because data is not always unbiased. And equally important will be the voices of the community that will be solicited throughout the community engagement process. And so I'm hopeful that this needs assessment results in investing also in the communities to address the root cause of gun violence. And then I also want to make sure that all of our communities, in the end, are places where our families want to live and play and where they feel safe. I also want to learn about the gaps in the programs. Where are the gaps, so that we can make sure that we're investing in that. And particularly interested in to see whether there is a need to bolster our gun education program for the legal gun owners, a little bit of more on that as well. And then again, thank you to the committee for all the great work that they've done, and I'm happy to support the action.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Supervisor Wasson-Reamer.
Thank you. I just want to say, as the mother of a toddler, I think often about how terrifying it would be to get a call that there is an active shooter in her school. And what this comes down to, and what this effort's all about, is how we keep families safe, how we keep communities safe, and how we keep kids safe. I'm just really grateful for the leadership of so many members of our community who've contributed their ideas of what we can do and how we can do better in San Diego on gun safety to keep our families safe. There's no question that this is a public health crisis. You look at other countries and the number of deaths they have by guns is just lower than ours by orders of magnitude, exponentially lower. So that means that it's a problem that stems from how we deal with guns in our own communities. And I think it's just so important to take this action, and I'm just very proud to have been able to partner with Chair Fletcher on bringing this forward, and look forward to seeing this continue to move forward and support this work.
Thank you so much. Supervisor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. I wish the groups that you initially worked with were more broad in their approach. It's hard for me to think in terms of health when some of the groups, or one in particular, their focus is just to shut down gun shows. I'm not sure what that, to me, the direction I'd love to see is working with veterans groups, because we know that veterans among all groups suffer the most suicides. And getting to the crux, whether the person uses any kind of weapon, whether it's a gun or a knife or however, I think that we really need to think in terms of the violence overall and how we can help those folks from it. I mean, the two top categories are criminal activity and suicide. So, you know, looking at people that have just a single agenda, that's, to me, from my district, we think that you're putting your hand on the scale, and it's not an open and fair process. And I really want to focus in on how we can reduce suicides and how we can address it in a meaningful way. So I think moving forward, making sure there's a broad outreach and that there's a lot of opinions at the table so we can really look at it. And to my colleagues, Desmond's remarks, I also represent 2,000 square miles of unincorporated area. And I'm very fortunate where I live. The sheriffs are very quick to respond. But that's not true for all areas of my district. And people move there knowing that, and they're not upset with it. But they also, that pistol they have, that shotgun they have, isn't there because they don't need it. That's their form of protection. And so I think that having those types of groups at the table too, so that we can have balance moving forward, so we can get to conclusions that we can get a 5-0 vote on. I think that's really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Anderson. Appreciate all the comments, appreciate all the work, and look forward to what is ahead of us. With that, we have a motion by myself, seconded by Supervisor Lawson-Remer, to approve the recommendations on item 16. Please vote.
Chair Fletcher, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
We're going to move to agenda item number 17, receive an update on the COVID-19 response. I will turn it over to staff for their presentation.
Good morning, Chair Fletcher and members of the board. Today's presentation will feature our Public Health Officer, Dr. Wilma Wooten, who will provide a public health update. Additionally, David Estrella, Director of Housing and Community Development Services, will provide an update on the county's COVID-19 Response Emergency Rental Assistance Program and Public Health Hotel Program. Finally, Amy Thompson, Agency Executive Finance Director, will provide a COVID-19 response finance update. Now please welcome Dr. Wooten.
Thank you, Gary. Good afternoon, Chair Fletcher and members of the board. This slide shows the number of new cases reported by date of report since November 20th of last year. For the 10-day period from March 25th through April 3rd, daily cases reported have ranged from 97 to 619. The case count of 619 on March 29th includes a backlog of 457 cases from late December. Therefore, the 10-day average was approximately 230 cases per day. Based on wastewater surveillance and preliminary real-time testing surveillance, it is estimated that currently over 99% of the cases in the last several weeks have been due to the Omicron variants. Whole genome sequencing data to determine the variant type often lags. There has been an incremental increase in Omicron BA.2. In San Diego County, two key factors indicate that this variant is now the dominant Omicron variant. First, as of March 21st, wastewater sequencing indicated that 67% of the circulating viruses detected is due to Omicron BA.2. These data represent 2.2 million San Diegans. Second, data looking at S-gene testing show that 80 to 90% of the specimens are likely Omicron BA.2. Nonetheless, cases, hospitalizations, ICU admissions, and deaths continue to decline. On Friday, February 25th, the CDC released COVID-19 community levels that were developed for the current pandemic landscape. New levels were created because the risk of medically significant disease, hospitalization, and death from COVID-19 is greatly reduced for most people due to current levels of population immunity and tools available. The new metric shift the focus from eliminating COVID-19 transmission to protecting the most vulnerable and minimizing the burden on the healthcare system. As of Thursday, March 31st, the CDC has assigned San Diego County to a low community level based on metrics among the case rate, new COVID-19 hospital admissions, and the percent of staffed inpatient beds occupied by COVID-19 patients. As you may recall, at the last update to your board, our county had a high COVID-19 community level. Regarding the changes in guidelines, as of March 1st, masks are no longer required, but are strongly recommended in public indoor settings regardless of vaccination status. As of March 12th, masks are no longer required, but are strongly recommended in school and childcare settings. However, individual school districts may continue with a mask requirement if they determined it necessary. The County of San Diego, however, continues to align with these two state guidelines. As a reminder, metrics and masking guidelines have evolved to adapt to this new phase of the pandemic. People may choose to mask at any time, regardless of the current COVID-19 community level guidelines. However, people with symptoms, a positive test, or exposure to someone with COVID-19 should wear a mask and appropriately isolate or quarantine. In this next slide, it shows the percent change for cases, hospitalizations, and deaths from March 3rd to April 3rd of this year. Cases by report date are down 49%, going from 632 to 323 cases. Hospitalizations are down 69%, going from 427 to 132 admissions. Lastly, deaths, which lag behind cases and hospitalizations, are down 90%, going from 10 to 1 death. Focusing on the vaccinations, this slide shows the tremendous and continuous collective efforts made by community partners and community staff members to administer COVID-19 vaccines throughout our region for almost 16 months. As of Friday, April 1st, over 6.9 million vaccine doses have been administered in San Diego County. Over 2.9 million, or 93.9% of eligible San Diego residents 5 years of age and older have received at least one dose, and over 2.5 million, or 82.5%, have been fully vaccinated. As well, over 1.2 million booster doses have been administered to eligible residents, which is 55.6% of individuals who are eligible to receive a booster. This is an increase of 1.3% since the last presentation to your board. These results do include aggregate data provided by the Veteran Affairs and the Department of Defense. Now, looking at a breakdown of vaccinations by age group is demonstrated on this slide, which does not include individuals vaccinated by the Veteran Affairs or the Department of Defense. In general, the green bar represents individuals vaccinated with at least one vaccine dose. The orange bar represents individuals fully vaccinated, and the blue bar represents the number of individuals who are fully vaccinated and have received a booster. The total percentage of the eligible population 5 years of age and older who are vaccinated is shown by the top green, orange, and blue lines. Note that only those 12 years of age and older can receive a booster, noted by the blue bar. Therefore, the total fully vaccinated plus boosted percentage, or the blue bar, does not include 5 to 11-year-olds, as they are not yet eligible for a booster. Of the eligible booster populations, the age range of 12 to 17 years old has the lowest percentage at 36%, while those who are 65 years of age and older show the highest percentage at 70.5%. This slide shows the estimated 7-day rolling average daily hospitalization rate by vaccination status for San Diego County residents in the 3-month period from December 26th of last year through March 26th of this year. To align with the California Department of Public Health's reporting of vaccine effectiveness, all 3 rates are depicted by the orange, green, and blue lines. The hospitalization rate among those who are not fully vaccinated is shown by the top orange line. The green line shows the rate for fully vaccinated residents, and the blue line shows the rate for fully vaccinated residents who also have received a booster dose, who are 12 years of age and older. From this graph, we can see that in the 3-month period, the hospitalization rate among those residents not fully vaccinated, again shown by the orange line, is consistently higher than the rate among fully vaccinated residents and those who have also received a booster, which again is shown by the blue line. On the right side of this slide, looking at the hospitalization rate for the week February 20th through March 5th, there was an average of 1.8 hospitalizations each day per 100,000 not fully vaccinated residents. This is compared to 0.71 hospitalizations per day per 100,000 fully vaccinated residents and 0.55 hospitalizations per day per 100,000 residents with a booster. Therefore, the hospitalization rate was about 3 times higher for not fully vaccinated residents compared to those residents that were fully vaccinated with a booster. This slide shows the estimated 7-day rolling average daily death rate by vaccination status for San Diego County residents in the same 3-month period. On the right side of this slide, looking at the death rate for the week, again, February 20th through March 5th, there was an average of 5.29 deaths per day per 100,000 not fully vaccinated residents. This is compared to 1.23 deaths per day per 100,000 fully vaccinated residents and 0 deaths per day per 100,000 residents with a booster. There have been no deaths reported for those fully vaccinated with a booster for this date range. Thus, the date rate for the 3-month period was about 4 times higher for not fully vaccinated residents compared to those who were fully vaccinated. Now, last week on Tuesday, March 29th, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration authorized the second booster dose of either the Pfizer or Moderna COVID-19 vaccine for older individuals and certain immunocompromised individuals. The agency amended the emergency use authorization. A second booster dose of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine or the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine may be administered to individuals 50 years of age and older at least 4 months after receipt of a first booster dose. A second booster dose of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine may be administered to individuals 12 years of age and older with certain kinds of immunocompromise at least 4 months after receipt of a first booster dose. As well, a second booster dose of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine may be administered also at least 4 months after the first booster dose to individuals 18 years of age and older with the same certain kinds of immunocompromise. This action will now make a second booster dose of these vaccines available to populations at higher risk for severe disease, hospitalization, and death. As reported at the last COVID-19 update on March 1st, the County of San Diego continues to align with the California's Smarter Plan. Amending the Maxim healthcare contract for as-needed nursing support aligns with the Smarter Plan. Finally, throughout the pandemic, we continue to encourage everyone to be COVID safe. To protect yourselves and others, it is recommended that everyone take the actions as cited on this slide. Now please welcome David Estrella, who will share information on the County Emergency Rental Assistance Program and the Public Health Hotel Program.
Thank you, Dr. Wooten, and good afternoon. During the pandemic, the county received multiple allocations from the state and federal government to support low-income renters impacted by COVID-19 through the Emergency Rent and Utility Assistance Program, or ERAP. The total amount allocated to date is over $253 million, of which $224 million is available for awards. As of April 1st, 2022, the county has successfully awarded over $185 million on behalf of 19,670 households. The county anticipates receiving additional federal funds, but the timing and amount are still to be determined. On February 9, 2022, Governor Newsom signed SB 115 to address the gap between when federal funds may be available and the current need for assistance. Through SB 115, the state would provide a forgivable cash flow loan to cover ERAP payments until federal funds are available. If federal funding is not received by June 30 of 2023, or if the federal funds cannot be used for loan reimbursements, the state will forgive the cash flow loan. The state requires a resolution to apply for and request SB 115 cash flow loan funding. This request will result in up to $90 million in additional appropriations for the ERAP program, which will be used to fund applications in the system that currently have not been assigned. The cash flow loan will cover applications received on or before March 31st, 2022, and cannot be used for rent and utilities accrued on or after April 1, 2022. After review of the final loan terms and approval by your board today, the county will continue to award ERAP assistance to support the local rent economy and stabilize the housing situation for thousands of low-income residents throughout the county's jurisdiction. I will now provide an update on the public health hotel program's two components for isolation and quarantine and high-risk hotels. First, isolation and quarantine hotels. Throughout the pandemic, the county's public health program provided a safe place to isolate or quarantine to more than 14,500 people. The isolation and quarantine component of public health program ended in March of 2022. Second, the high-risk hotels provide safe isolation for people who are not infected with COVID-19. However, due to a medical condition, have a higher risk of negative impacts associated with contracting COVID-19 and are also experiencing homelessness. The high-risk hotel component has been extended through June 2022 to allow additional time for guests to work with case managers to identify permanent housing or longer-term shelters. There are currently 78 people in 72 households receiving lodging and services at 2 hotels. 54 households have identified a housing subsidy and are actively looking for a rental unit. 15 households have not identified a housing resource. The county is working closely with our city partners to identify housing or long-term shelter options for all of our guests. I will now turn it over to Amy Thompson. Thank you.
Thank you, David. The county's weekly spend rate for its COVID response has dropped from the last reported rate to your board of $4.5 million on March 1st to an estimated $3.8 million as shown on the slide today, for a decrease of $700,000. Large drivers of the decrease are in contracted testing costs, public health hotel rooms to align to the current high-risk population, staffing, as well as revised estimates for PPE. As we continue to transition to the next phase of the pandemic response, the weekly spend should continue to decrease. Of the weekly spend amount, the percentage of funding remains at just over 50% for FEMA-eligible activities, with the remainder covered by ARPA funds. Since the last COVID update, FEMA reimbursement was extended through July 1st, 2022. Given that, we will continue efforts to claim and leverage FEMA for eligible isolation, testing, and vaccination costs through the end of the fiscal year. I will now pass the presentation back over to Gary.
Thank you, Amy. In addition to receiving this update, we recommend your board take the following actions with respect to this item. Ratify all actions taken in response to the local health emergency and local emergency. In accordance with Board Policy A-87, amend contract number 562092 with Maxim Healthcare Service Holdings Incorporated for as-needed nursing services. Waive Board Policy B-29, which requires full cost recovery for grants and administrative overhead costs associated with the Supplemental Immunization Local Assistance Grant funding. Adopt a resolution entitled Resolution of the County of San Diego Board of Supervisors authorizing a state rental assistance program loan award. Adopt a resolution entitled Resolution authorizing continuance of teleconference public meetings pursuant to Government Code Section 54953. Establish appropriations of $90 million for implementation of Emergency Rental Assistance Program, ERAP, in association with the State Bill 115 cash flow loan. Subject to your questions, this concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Let's go to our public speakers.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. We have 24 requests to speak on this item, 14 in person and 10 by phone. Also note for the record that we received 13 e-comments, 12 in opposition and 1 neutral. Any members of the public that requested to speak on item 17 by phone, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We will begin with the in-person speakers. All the in-person speakers are in opposition to this item. As your name is called, please come forward and stand against the east wall under the murals until it is your turn to speak. I will be calling you in groups of 5, so please listen for your name. I'd like to invite forward the following individuals: Andrew Prakash, Mike Borello, Freedom Lover, Mary D., and Audra. You may come forward in any order. I'll ask you to please state your name for the audio record. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board.
Good afternoon. Mary D. here. First of all, I do want to say this is can you still hear me? This is COVID related, and because it stems from your response to our concerns about the county's COVID response. So I'm here today to again bring up the issue of audience clapping and to ask you to please revise the rules of procedure. My particular concern is Rule 4, Item F, which banned threatening language, but then in a flagrant act of overreach, went far beyond the original area of concern to also ban clapping. Additionally, I also want to pointedly highlight Chair Fletcher's glaring double standard in his selective enforcement of his very own rules. You openly allow and even encourage clapping at certain times, for example, during the proclamations or even after the recent selection of the interim sheriff. As such, I now formally ask you to revise that rule and remove clapping from your list of banned audience activities. The First Amendment is not arbitrary or subjective. If clapping is a welcome First Amendment expression after proclamations, it is equally so after we the people speak as well. As a little blast from the past reminder, I want to play this for you. This is Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
But that, it's a policy that can evolve, and that we are going to be and remain open to stakeholder feedback and input to improve these rules as we move forward. And if things are not working, or if people have concerns in the future, at any board meeting, we could look at changing them. And
so as such, I am here today as a stakeholder to let you know yet again about the grave concerns I have regarding your capricious suppression of the public's right to respectful self-expression. I now publicly call on the board to revise the rules of procedure to allow short, respectful clapping response from the audience, just as you already selectively allow it. Your immigrant honoree this morning said it best: self-expression is a human right.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Audra. Vaccines by origin, original design, were never intended to wane nor allow infections to break through. If a booster is required every few months, we can't really say it's a vaccine, and we can't really call it a therapeutic if there are serious safety issues. Today, I submit a compendium vaccine injury report to the County Board of Supervisors in San Diego Health and Human Services containing a preponderance of evidence from reputable sources. Collective evidence strongly infers that the COVID-19 vaccines are causing irreparable injury, permanent disability, and even death to many individuals. Given that factual basis, we should consider a key question: how can any official justify any measure, ordinance, or decree that mandates, requires, encourages, or endorses universal vaccination when one group of people is indiscriminately injured or killed to protect the other group? If we know the vaccine is unsafe and even a single individual is killed, there can be no claim of greater good. There is no good in saving one to sacrifice a few, all for satisfying bureaucratic metrics. Killing vitiates any beneficial risk analysis. There's no math required, no Bayesian analysis. The answer is it cannot be justified. Many others agree, but I welcome Dr. Eric McDonald in this monthly YouTube rebuke to misinformationalists to tell me why we are wrong. By this simple argument, I indict this council and county's health as having committed and continuing to commit unethical and immoral, if not criminally deceptive acts against the people of San Diego County. This notice, now a public record, calls for a cease and desist in all further endorsements of COVID-19 vaccinations and to end COVID-19 vaccinations in San Diego County now until fully informed consent can be provided to the people. That includes the risk detailed in the consent of my report. You all got it. Wilma, I suggest you take a look at it.
As the next speaker is coming forward, I'll invite 5 additional speakers: Ryan, Mark Dorian, Jason Robo, Sean Fredrickson, and Summer Boger.
Update on Andrew Prakash, sorry. Update on the COVID response. I'll give you the update on the response right now. We're done with this board, and we're smashing through all the doors to let all your smoke out. You've destroyed people's lives, their confidence, their ability to work, to start businesses, to thrive, and realize a dream. The people will thrive when we prune this board. The update is that people need to take off their muzzles, put aside the hopelessness that you've promoted, and start living again. The update is to stop living in fear, and the person with that idea needs to start that business to action that dream because it's time. The update is that people need to get back to work and supply chains need to open for the long haul. The update is that you have proven yourselves utterly incompetent throughout this entire pandemic. Strike that. That's not an update. We've known that for quite some time. The update is that vaccines will never be mandatory in this nation, state, or county, and it doesn't matter what bill or law you try to pass. It doesn't even matter how many corrupt corporations you have on your side. Not by power, not by might, but by his spirit. The update is that you must relinquish your seats. It's funny to see you guys without masks, by the way, in the childish games. We got a county to save, and it starts with you. You have proven yourselves extremely dangerous and a threat to the future of this county and its residents. You are the source of misinformation, of corruption, of lies, and of evil, and you are in direct opposition to anything good, true, honorable, or worthy of praise. This county is returning to the Lord in the mighty name of Jesus, and that's the update. And I can draft the memo for you if you want.
Next speaker, please.
Hi, again, my name is Ryan Heath, and I'm with the Gavel Project. We're a nonprofit organization. And I'm noticing a theme yet again. I'm here again to point out themes and educate the public. And what I see is a pattern where your organization somehow develops these working groups who put together recommendations for board consideration. These working groups are made up of community members, these individuals not really knowing where they come from, or I'm assuming volunteers from the community that you now have the right, apparently, to discriminate against based on their viewpoints and based on their political ideologies ahead of time, based on a vote here tonight, which, by the way, you should all know under the Civil Rights Act exposes all of you to personal liability. If you, in fact, take discriminatory action against an individual because of what they believe in, and you take them off of these committees and you prevent them from holding public office, that actually violates their First Amendment free speech rights. And you can all be sued personally. So there's just a nice ticket of advice for you. But the thing that I see here is that these working groups, these recommendations for community consideration, these proposals, let's say, are being bid out to a bunch of people in the community who happen to do what I do, which is practice law. These are attorneys. There are a few people probably sitting in this audience in suits. These are the bad guys. These are the folks who are getting $7.5 million from this county to issue reports. These are the folks who are deciding where these $90 million in government contracts for this provision are going to go. The game is up. We know what you're doing. I'm Ryan, I'm with the Gavel Project, and it's nice to meet all of you. Thanks.
Next speaker, please.
Mark Dorian, myocarditis has already been recognized by the CDC. Lots of cases in young people and children who virtually have no danger whatsoever from COVID. A Swedish peer-reviewed study has proven the Pfizer vaccine can cause autoimmune hepatitis. About 70% of people with autoimmune hepatitis are women. CDC.gov says type 2 autoimmune hepatitis generally affects girls between the ages 2 to 14. A Swedish reviewed and published study dated February 25th, 22 finds spike protein RNA from Pfizer vaccine converts to DNA in liver cells within 6 hours, increasing expression of the enzyme Lyme1. Liver cells express the spike protein on the surface of the cell, which could cause targeting of these cells to create autoimmune hepatitis. It is also possible it could pass through the placenta of a pregnant woman. They also state, and I quote, there has been case reports on individuals who developed autoimmune hepatitis, in parentheses 39, after BNT162b2 vaccination. That's Pfizer. Next quote, our study shows that BNT162b2 can be reverse transcribed to DNA in liver cell line 7, and this may give rise to the concern if BNT162b2 derived DNA may be integrated into the host genome and affect the integrity of genomic DNA, which may potentially mediate genotoxic side effects, end quote. So to summarize, liver cells express the spike protein on the surface of the cell, which could cause targeting of these cells to create autoimmune hepatitis. There have been case reports on individuals who developed autoimmune hepatitis after Pfizer's vaccination. This reverse transcription can possibly become a permanent part of someone's genomic DNA and pass through a pregnant woman's placenta. Autoimmune hepatitis mostly affects women and girls. This is an imminent danger to the public, and you must stop the vaccine mandates immediately, especially Pfizer vaccines. Yes, I critically researched this extremely reputable authors, funding, and publisher, as well as...
Thank you. Your time is up. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Summer Boger. Hi, Nathan Fletcher, if I can call you chairman. Again, I do have my notices. These are my letters. I'm going to Those are my letters. So that letter is addressed to you, but there's copies for each of the supervisors. Hold on for just a second. I'm going to give you a couple more. Here's 11 other letters. There's a bunch coming in the mail probably. Maybe some more. So those letters are letters of intent to file against your bond claim with AIG, as I explained before. And with each one of those letters, if we make claims because you don't follow through on the demands within 5 days, then you will be liable personally and financially responsible for those deductibles. And that's just the beginning. So good luck with that. And just wanted to remind you what I said last time is that we're filing against your policy number 014208623, and you must stop coercing all forms of COVID-19 policies and protocols and the COVID emergency cease and desist membership with the World Health Economic Forum, which is the indirect conflict with the U.S. Constitution, reinstate all of the lost jobs from mandates, and resign from office. And the whole show me your papers thing, right now, if you look inside of a vaccine insert for COVID-19 injections, there is no paper that tells us the benefits and the risks. There is no paper that says what is in those vaccines or those injections. And then you want us to show papers to be able to have a job. So I'm sorry, show me the paper, the inside of that package insert, which should be in there like all other vaccinations, and then we can show you the papers because we will be having proper informed consent. No proper informed consent means no.
Thank you. Your time is up. Thank you. As the next speaker is coming forward, I'll invite the remaining speakers in person, John Moore, Consuelo, and Sarah.
I like the clapping. I mean, it's a part of public engagement, isn't it, Fletcher? Well, my name is Sean Fredrickson. Good afternoon. What a joy to be back here in front of this board of despots. It's an election year. Woo! For the past 2 years, we were subject to the removal of rights, destruction of families, rise in suicide, demolition of small businesses. For over a year, we've been attempting to blame this solely on the cause, which is corrupt government. Well, the virus didn't destroy our communities, you did. This is why it's so great. It's an election year, guys, which means, obviously, these mandates will make you look bad when you run for re-election. Therefore, backtracking on the data is the only solution. And let's focus on the number of citizens which you've coerced to receive an untested medical experiment, rather than the reality that nothing has actually changed between this month and last month. Well, the good news, we the people are wide awake, aren't we? We're awake, we're learning. All right, so sure, we're playing from behind as civics isn't taught any longer in public school. It's for a reason, obviously, isn't it, Fletcher? But as we learn our rights, we're gonna promote the constitutional candidates which we select. Get ready for June 7th is the primary. Educate yourself. These are not the kind of representatives we want. And here's a great thing. The general election is November 8th, which means every state senator, every state assembly member is up for re-election, including the ones who passed this abortion bill today. They're up for re-election. So let's make this the greatest turnout of Christians in California history. You want to ensure this corruption never happens again? Let's remove these tyrants. Fletcher, I'm talking to you. The emergency order ends with an educated and activated citizenry. Thank you for doing that.
Next speaker, please.
Jason Robo. Hospitals are for-profit and they operate at capacity, so that's not the unvaccinated's fault, first of all. Firearm deaths versus vaccines are interesting because suicide insurance policies aren't honored, neither are they for people that took the death jab, so that's funny. And Fauci with his fixation on asphyxiation is insane. Speaking of face diapers, making shitty people, you first make a stockpile of diapers, and that's why we have 94% of people have pre-existing conditions. And that's no surprise because people literally eat shit. 1 in 6 people die of heart disease. I've mentioned this multiple times. Was it the McDonald's variant? Were they royally screwed by Burger King? Well, nobody gives a shit about that. This like a magic bullet is this vaccine idea for people who can't handle their shit. 30% of people are literally constipated, and we have 180 million cases of diarrhea in this country. Desmond, I appreciate the farm-to-table thing that you were talking about. That's what we need instead of Lemur with the LGBT bagging us with the obese transgendered who kills people via crazy, greasy, salty chicken. We've got pre-existing conditions that show that we're on Shake Your Foundation, a handshake with Michael J. Fox, as I've noted before, physically. And activity recommendations by government are dishonest. They say 20 minutes when we need 60 to 90 minutes of activity every day. We showed Plandemic here, plandemicseries.com, which was a group comment that you neutered after the Wooten comment that I made. And I challenged her blackness, and yeah, she whitewashes medical tyranny. She's like Darth Vader, a black voice with a white man inside behind her. As hospitalization, rape.
Mr. Robo, I'm going to pause your time. You have the right to come down here and say offensive, really troubled, disturbing things, but I don't think anyone up here believes you actually believe any of the things you're saying. You're here for entertainment value. It's disgusting. It's vile. And it doesn't reflect well on people who might have legitimate differences of opinion with what this board does. And so the First Amendment affords you the right to come down here and make a fool out of yourself, comment after comment after comment, and say just disgusting and vile things. But it does not in any way convey that you have any actual belief in what you're saying, more that you're down here out of some troubled sense of a need to be as outrageous as you can be. And the First Amendment will let you do it, and you can continue to do it. And that's your right, but it's also our right as a board to say that it's out of line, and it's inappropriate, and it's unbecoming, and it contributes nothing to legitimate policy differences around what we have as a board.
Or what?
No, you can finish your time. Your disgusting, vile vomiting of nonsense that you make up because you think it's entertaining and funny. And I'm sorry for whatever hardship you've gone through in life that has led you to a mental state that you think this is the way to express what you do. And it's your right.
This is a very loaded side, you're saying.
And you're going to allow it to continue to go forward. But there's a fundamental difference between you and people who come up here who have principled opposition to what we do. And that is duly noted for
I don't think you respect any opposition.
Finish your time.
Can I start again? All right, you talk about hospital rates. It's more like hospital rape. You talk about the blue bar. What about the foo bar? We're all fucked up beyond recognition from your policies. I talked about a documentary, They're Trying to Kill Us, how eugenics is killing black people and indigenous. And yeah, you're from Chapel Hill, part of the Wuhan epidemiology. You're supposed to be our origins. You got look down syndrome. You're screwing over your fellow man. Nathan, you ignore us. You're just a retarded faggot.
Next speaker, please.
Thank you for this opportunity to address the board. My name is John Moore, and I'm a resident of the city of San Diego. In 2021, Dr. Mark Skidmore of Michigan State University estimated that the U.S. could have saved 88,000 lives if the U.S. had removed the ban on hydroxychloroquine and made it widely available. In March of 2022, Dr. Skidmore, after a survey, estimated total U.S. deaths from COVID inoculation at 294,000. VAERS estimates are as high as 2.1 million deaths and 100 million maimed. Uttar Pradesh is a state in India with 233 million people. They refused all vaccines and only used ivermectin as a preventative and remedy for a building COVID epidemic. Indian health authorities reduced the infection rate to 0.007 thousandths of 1%, effectively zero. On December 6, 2021, a complaint was filed with the International Criminal Court in The Hague, Netherlands, on behalf of the British people to investigate the high incidence of death and permanent injury from COVID vaccines, quote unquote. The 46-page complaint of the UK government has failed to, it alleges the UK government failed to investigate reported deaths and injuries. The petition contended that all harmful consequences of the quote unquote vaccines, lockdowns, and virus itself meet the criteria of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes against the British people. Their words, not mine. The complaint maintains that suppression of effective COVID-19 treatments like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine directly resulted in many more COVID deaths than should have occurred. The complaint says the suppression of safe and effective alternative COVID-19 remedies amounts to murder and warrants a full investigation by the court. Several well-known Americans were in the petition. Dr. Skidmore concluded that COVID inoculation is too dangerous to be managed.
Thank you. Time is up. Next speaker, please.
The update. Money, 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 money. Money, how much money, and the money goes here, and the money goes there, and the money for the vaccine, and the money, 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 money. So this flu, which I probably got 3 times, never tested, made it through, took ivermectin, hydroxy, got through it within a day. And guess what? I got sick in 1999 once, and I got sick in 2001 once, and I've got sick in 2004 once. I mean, I've gotten sick before. It's not a big deal. You get sick and you take care of yourself. I actually even had to go to the hospital before, and that was in 2001. I'm pretty sure it wasn't COVID. But since you shut down everything, lockdown, the great lockdown, which was the greatest transfer of wealth, money, 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 so that small businesses had to close down. And you also told tenants that they could steal from landlords, and then made a promise that you're going to pay for the time that they stole from landlords. And emboldened actually really bad behavior. You talk about violence before. There's a lot of violence that's come out of these policies that you've put together. But what I want is, the most of this that has been your approach is to transfer money and under the guise of flu. That's all.
Next speaker, please.
Consuelo. Keep on, for the people at home watching, San Diego County, listen. Keep on defending freedom. We may be the last generation which has the possibility to rebel. And if you don't rebel, there may be no more chances. Humanity can be reduced to a robot-like existence. So rebel while there is still time. Remember, we are in their house playing their game by their rules, on their court. Now ask yourself, are we going to win by playing on their court? Are we going to advance playing by their rules? Are we going to escape slavery by abiding by their tyrannical requests? The answer is no. Never will we ever advance as a species under their rule. They try to fit everyone in a left-wing or right-wing box because they know you cannot think outside their paradigm. Keep on defending freedom. Freedom is the absence of a ruling class. You cannot be free and have someone that rules over you. They are complete opposites. Therefore, freedom can only be obtained by removing the people claiming to be above you. There is no other way to be free than freeing ourselves from the ruling class. As long as there are people that can dictate what you can or cannot do, you will always be enslaved by them. No matter how many privileges they allow you to have, there is no such thing as a good or righteous ruling class, because the very foundation of ruling over someone is to dominate them. Our psyche has been captured. They're playing the people against each other to control, exploit, and distract us from the real problem, the system that they have created. Keep on defending.
Thank you. Your time is up. Final call for the remaining speakers in person, Mike Borrello and Freedom Lover. We'll now hear from those that requested to speak by phone. When it is your turn to speak, you'll be unmuted, and you will hear a recording that will tell you to begin your comments after the beep. I'll remind the callers that they should mute their TV or live video stream before they begin speaking. We'll begin with our first caller.
Good afternoon, Board of Tyrants. My name is Amber Long. So let me get this straight. You guys strip people of their jobs, their incomes, their livelihoods, their way of providing for their family, and you guys pretend like you care about us. But you don't. You don't care if your constituents end up on the streets or turn to alcohol or drugs. You guys don't care. You guys just continuously create problems and pretend to fix them, all while giving your guys' selves a big old pat on the back. You guys congratulate each other left and right and pretend like you guys are actually doing something. But in fact, you guys are hurting us, the public, and our society, and taking away our freedom. Every year living here gets harder. Growing up, I would always ask my dad. I would always come home, and my dad would say, I would always ask my dad what's up. His response would always be, the cost of living sucka. And now I understand that his saying was true. The cost always goes up. It might come down slightly, but it always shoots back up again higher than it was before. You guys keep saying you're doing a great job, but you guys aren't doing jack squat. Almost every week, I see a local post about someone's car getting stolen or broken into. I've had my car broken into twice. Whatever the county has been doing for the past couple decades has not been working, so please change it up a little, or at least try to give a slight shit. And for those who are unaware, our government is corrupt. The problems you see around were brought forth by them, specifically by design. They funnel money to fix problems, but the money always runs out, and the problems never seem to go away. Our government are just basically thieves in disguise, pretending to be good people when they are not. They're just thieves and puppets.
Your time is up. We'll now hear from the next caller.
Truth. So far, these supervisors have spent $680 million to extend this false emergency. And that doesn't include the billions in federal funds they spent, including from the emergency takeover experts, FEMA. All for a virus with a fatality rate considerably less than 1%, according to Anthony Fauci. In this item's fiscal impact section, it says, quote, the public benefit for providing these services far outweigh these costs. Well, personally, I've received a total of $0 in financial benefits and 0 societal, environmental, or biological benefits from everything these supervisors have done / are doing in regards to their COVID response / lockdown. I've seen countless people go out of business, lose their jobs, turn to substance abuse, and be refused proper medical care. Here are some of the stories of young Americans who've died from the COVID shots these supervisors have been pushing. 24-year-old George Watts Jr. died after getting the Pfizer shot. There was blood in his urine, his face got swollen, and then he started coughing up blood. It was vaccine-induced myocarditis. 19-year-old Simone Scott got the Moderna shot, then got nosebleeds and couldn't walk. She was diagnosed with myocarditis and had to get a heart transplant, then died. 16-year-old Cameron Thomas got the Pfizer shot, then suffered hemodynamic collapse. Blood clots blocked her lungs. 21-year-old John Francis Foley got the Johnson & Johnson shot, then died in his sleep by the next morning. The amount of girls who've had to have their legs amputated after getting a COVID shot is heart-wrenching. Go to thecovidblog.com to read more of these stories.
Thank you. We'll now hear from the next caller.
Hey, Melissa here. How is everybody? It's been painful watching the meeting, as usual. Pretty infuriating, so I'll try to keep myself contained. We're sitting here asking for permission to clap in these meetings after living through 2 years of hell from people like you, Nathan. I am calling to declare that the local state of emergency has long passed. For those that think that we're getting back to normal, San Diego County has been under a state of emergency for 780 days now. That means that this board continues to act as if our Constitution has been suspended and they can spend our painfully earned money as if it is laying around on the sidewalk. They can implement more illegal mandates the moment the wind changes, They can take away your ability to provide for yourself or your family by classifying you in any manner they deem necessary. In American Jurisprudence Encyclopedia of United States Law, suspension of the Constitution is prohibited as follows. No emergency justifies the violation of the United States Constitution, Section 71. Neither the legislature nor any executive or judicial officer may disregard the provisions of the Constitution in case of emergency, Section 98. Therefore, anyone who declares the suspension of constitutionally guaranteed rights to freely travel, peacefully assemble, earn a living, freely worship, etc., they violate their constitutional oath and thus immediately forfeit their office and authority, and their proclamations may be disregarded with impunity. If you choose not to forfeit your seat, the good people of San Diego County have 277 long days left with you in charge, Nathan. But who's counting?
Thank you. Time is up. We'll now hear from the next caller.
Karen B., item 17. I was listening to Dr. Wooten's comments today on the status of the COVID cases. Cases are down 49%, hospitalizations are down 69%, and deaths are down 90%. If you go to california.gov on COVID-19 hospitalizations, in San Diego County, there are only 29 people in ICUs due to COVID, and I hope they all recover. These numbers are extremely low. I don't see a reason to continue the state of emergency. Also, there is an error in what she said in deaths being 5.29 per 100,000. I believe that should be per million as per the COVID Watch report. Again, COVID cases and deaths are down. In the whole state of California, 16 counties are currently reporting 0 COVID hospitalizations. Remove the state of emergency. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from the next caller.
Hi, Supervisors and Wilma. This is Paul Hinton. The CDC lied again, big time this time. It misreported 72,277 deaths from other causes of COVID and vice versa, which is over 7% of the total deaths. Most striking is that they misreported almost 24% of young kids' deaths from other causes as COVID. To them, it is a, quote, coding logic error, unquote. But there is a human dimension. It's like false advertising, where they say how big a killer COVID is, and it turns out to be something else. I was glad, though, not to hear the CDC mentioned as a data source in the presentation. But I don't trust recommendations either. Now, one drug for long COVID works by dissolving a certain RNA in the blood, which leads me to wonder whether the RNA vaccine itself is the problem. And what the COVID crew won't tell you is that COVID-19 symptoms, especially the loss of taste and smell, are symptoms of human coronavirus, HCOV-43, one of the 4 seasonal types of COVID flu. And they were reported specifically in a long list of symptoms by both British and German doctors and researchers after the 1889 to 91 Russian flu pandemic.
Thank you. Time is up. We'll now hear from the next caller.
My name is Diane Ake. I'm with Reopen San Diego. It represents thousands of people. What I want to know is, I would like you to talk about this when you have your discussion. What criteria will you use to end the state of emergency? What are your benchmarks? What measure will you use? So far, you've stated none. You continue a state of emergency for years and have no end in sight. When will you know that the emergency is over? You need to tell us, the public, because it's an abuse of power to indefinitely extend a state of emergency, and it's also fraud to collect federal money based on an emergency that doesn't exist with no criteria. So what is the criteria for the emergency? None of us, the people in this city, can see any grounds for emergency. So why are you continuing a state of emergency? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Fletcher, that concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you. We'll go to Supervisor Lawson-Remer.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I just want to comment that I think we've done an extraordinary job of getting through an extraordinary difficult time, and I very much thank the leadership of my colleagues, Chair Fletcher and Vice Chair Vargas, in all their work leading our COVID subcommittee, as well as the leadership of all of our county staff, and Dr. Wooten and Nick Macchione, and everyone who's been working so tirelessly. I do just want to take a moment to acknowledge that we aren't through this pandemic at this point, and it's not just the data that we saw today, but there's an entire subset of our population that is not yet vaccinated and is not allowed to get vaccinated, cannot be vaccinated, and continues to create a lot of challenges and costs for many members of our community. And I'm talking about kids under 5. You know, my daughter's preschool was shut last week. And so it's not just impacting young people under 5, but it impacts the parents of kids under 5 with huge ripple effects. We have daycares that are continue to be open and closed, daycare providers that don't have a reliable source of income. All of our stimulus funds that we utilized over the last 2 years to support these centers staying open are exhausted, they're gone. And we're now at a moment where everyone thinks, you know, we're kind of out on the other side, and we're sort of back to quote normal, and parents are expected to be back at work, which, you know, is a real problem if you have a kid who's under 5 and they can't get vaccinated, and you don't have childcare, and the preschools are closed. So I think it's just very important for us to acknowledge that we have a vulnerable population that remains vulnerable, that has huge ripple effects, not just on those kiddos, but really on parents everywhere. And we talk all the time about the childcare crisis, but this is a childcare crisis that's not over. It's a pandemic-related childcare crisis, and we're still in the middle of it.
Thank you. Supervisor Desmond.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad that actually we've gotten rid of the vaccine mandate for the new hires and the testing option. I think that happened yesterday, so I want to thank the task force for working through that and coming up to that conclusion that we're no longer requiring people to be vaccinated to work here at the county. And I do think some of our callers had some very good questions, and people want to know, I guess, when this emergency is ever going to end and what the criteria is or are that would say, okay, we've reached the point that the emergency should be over. And I've been against carrying on the emergency for several months now. And I think we kind of owe it to the constituents and the members of the county as to what are we looking for. And maybe it's just when the state ends theirs or the federal government ends theirs. But I think it's a legitimate question, is when do we think the emergency could be declared over? Wilma or anyone?
Thank you for that question, Supervisor Desmond. Actually, last year we presented a framework based on the research using 4 metrics: case rates, hospitalizations, deaths, and vaccinations. We can bring that report or those metrics back and review them again in our next update, but the numbers would have to be much lower than they currently are. So again, those 4 parameters are related to case rates, cases and case rates related to hospitalization rates, as well as deaths and vaccination rates. So we can update you at the next meeting.
I think I asked for this a year or 2 ago, and
yes,
you did, and then you provided it.
Yes, sir.
I forgot the results, but I guess I had assumed that the numbers where they are, that we'd be pretty darn close.
The numbers are not.
Really?
No, sir.
All right, bring them back, I guess.
Yes, we will bring that back.
Let me see. Even though I do think, unfortunately, keeping this out, we're sort of losing credibility, I think, with the people on this. And so I respect your numbers, and you can see we can bring them back, but I'd still like to ask, I guess, when we do the motion, we could separate item 2 and 6 out of the recommendations.
And Supervisor Desmond might also add that with ending the local emergency and the local health emergency, it would be a domino effect on if it was rescinded at the federal level, then at the state level, and then at local levels. So we'll follow that process.
Could you put up on the website, I guess, what those parameters or numbers are for the, I mean, we've already given them out a year ago. If we could put those up on maybe the COVID website, because people wonder what those numbers are, and if you got them out and made them public, it might be helpful.
Thank you. Vice Chair Vargas.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to the whole team for all the work that you've been doing for so long. And I just wanted to say that I think it's just really important that there's about 1 million San Diegans who are still eligible for their booster shot and have not received it yet. And so I just want to make sure that we emphasize and do everything that we can, especially now that there's an approval for the 4th booster, that we do everything that we can through our communications team to make sure that people get their 4th booster. So people who want to get their 4th booster are able to get it. Es sumamente importante. Creo que la dosis de refuerzo nos brinda protección adicional contra el COVID. Entonces quiero, por favor, que aquellas personas que ya están vacunadas, que tienen la segunda, la tercera vacuna de refuerzo, que vayan, y aquellas personas que tengan 50 años o más, que hayan tomado la vacuna de Pfizer o la vacuna de Moderna, que vayan y, por favor, busquen la 4ª vacuna, porque es muy importante, porque entre más estemos protegidos, mejores vemos los datos que nos ha demostrado la doctora Uten, y demuestra que la gente termina siendo más saludable cuando tienen el acceso a la dosis de refuerzo. The other thing I wanted to make sure we add is that we are accepting a supplemental grant funding for over $25 million to support immunization local assistance for county programs. And so I think it's really important that we use these resources for vaccination, including increasing vaccination rates, confidence through education, outreach, and partnership, developing community engagement strategies, among other things. So I'm excited about that piece. And then last but not least, with regards to the rental assistance program, I'm really supportive of the county seeking the $90 million forgivable catch loan from the state to ensure that we are able to continue this program while we wait for the federal funding. And so thank you for all the work that you've done. I know that it has really, really helped a lot of community members. I've heard it loud and clear from all of them. With that, I'm happy to support the recommended actions today. So I don't know if you need a motion. Happy to make a motion to support the recommendations.
Happy to second that. We'll go back to Supervisor Desmond.
Thank you. Real quick, I forgot to mention, I did want to say to staff, I haven't been an advocate of mandatory vaccinations, but I do want to commend you on the most vulnerable. The 65 and older is 99%, 98.8 is what you have here, that were fully vaccinated. And so I think the fact that the most vulnerable got, almost 99% was phenomenal. And those 50 to 64 years old and older, 81 or 88% of those actually got fully vaccinated. So I think we did a phenomenal stand-up job of protecting the most vulnerable in this pandemic. Thank you very much.
Supervisor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. The board's been very good about bifurcating this vote in the past, and I asked that we do it again on item 6, and I don't know if Supervisor Desmond wanted to include item 2 as well.
Yes.
I think we'll do one for 2 and 6 and one for everything else.
Perfect.
Okay. Good. I appreciate all the work. It's been a long few years. I think although we continue to respond and continue to be cautious and monitor what's happening, it's, as a county, I think we can look at one of the highest vaccination rates in the nation. We can look at one of the lowest death rates, not just in the nation, but in the state of California. It was almost 10 months ago that the remaining few restrictions on businesses were lifted, almost 10 months ago. Our kids are about to complete a full year in the classroom. And so we can see tremendous progress that we're making as we move forward. We do want to encourage people. The booster shots are important. You can look at the data and check it. It may not stop you from getting it, but will significantly lower the symptoms and lower the probability that you'll find yourself in the hospital. And so we want to continue to drive the widespread availability of boosters that are out there. And we will continue to make those available. And echoing Vice Chair Vargas's comments for those 50 and older, the additional one they can do and continue to monitor. And I think, in part, Supervisor Desmond, I think that part of the state of emergency is tied to state and federal actions. And part of it is, even after a wildfire, the fire is out, that continues while you clean up the final response. But I think everyone is looking ahead to the state and federal government moving forward to allow us to truly put this in an endemic stage and move forward treating it like we do other respiratory viruses. So with that, we have a motion by Vice Chair Vargas, seconded by myself. Our first vote will be on recommendations 2 and 6. We will vote now on recommendations 2 and 6.
Chair Fletcher, that motion passes with Supervisor Anderson and Supervisor Desmond voting no, all other supervisors being present and voting aye.
We will now vote on recommendations 1, 3, 4, 5, and 7. Please vote.
Chair Fletcher, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
Agenda item number 18 was continued to the next meeting, but we do need to allow the public speakers who put in a request the opportunity to speak to the continuance of that item. No action for the board to take. I'll ask the clerk to call forward our speakers on item 18.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. We have 3 requests to speak on item 18, 1 in person and 2 by phone. For those individuals that requested to speak by phone, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We did not receive any comments on this item. We'll begin with the in-person speaker. I'd like to invite forward Jason Robo. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board.
Jason Robo, yeah, you guys are, just trying to make your cut with the financial benefits, like the diabetic foot amputation surgeons, accessibility to take the money. And some of these companies are going to use maybe the same companies that pulled out of Russia, which just strengthens Russia and China. I recommend the book Fallout, Nuclear Bribes, Russian Spies, and Washington Lies That Enrich the Clinton and Biden Dynasties. Obama's also in the book, by Solomon and Bruner. He quotes in this other book that I read, The Shadows of the American Empire. I think it's Alfred McCoy. He's a CIA former chief, I believe. He quotes the sentiments of Halford Mackinder in 1904, then director of the London School of Economics, who rules the world island, commands the world. Beyond the vast mass of that island, which made up nearly 60% of the Earth's land mass, basically Eurasia, lay a less consequential hemisphere covered with broad oceans and a few outlying smaller islands. He meant, of course, Australia, Greenland, and the Americas.
Robo, can you speak to the continuance of item 18?
I'm saying on the note of credit are my next words, if that's okay. You've lost credit with anyone who is obedient to, that is not obedient to the lamestream lunacy of the media. And yeah, I appreciate that you sometimes let me finish my time, unlike the norovirus, which cut me off before. But I don't appreciate your psychoanalysis and conveniently sidesteps valid concerns about the foundations of human health that you've eroded, founded by the money you're greasing the tracks to take. Nathan, you should gouge your eyes out like Oedipus, because as far as Lady Liberty is concerned, you're a real motherfucker.
And Chair Fletcher, we had 2 requests to speak by phone. I do not see those individuals dialed into the conference line, and as you indicated, this item is being continued.
If I could just interrupt real quick. Mr. is it Bono? Is that it? Robo. Mr. Robo, your comments are inappropriate and vulgar. Now, you've got every right to come up here, and I agree with our chair, you've got every right to come up here and say anything you want at all. We'll fight and defend that right. But when you're vulgar and insulting, it takes away any credibility of any message that you're trying to deliver to us. I mean, we're regular people too, and we're here to do a job. And when you're treating us like dirt, it just seems, maybe we are that to you, but if we're trying to get a job done and do things for the betterment of everyone, so being vulgar and being insulting really just takes any credibility out of your thought process. And maybe you've had a couple of good ones, but you just don't seem to be able to convey them. So I'm tired of it, and it's hurting your cause more than helping it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Desmond. Thank you. He doesn't need your help. Your outbursts are interrupting the conduct of this meeting. He has a right to speak, just the same as others do. And so your conduct is interrupting the proceedings of this meeting. This is your first warning. We're now going to go to agenda item number 19, notice public hearing, finance and government group fees and rates related to debt service. I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second? Motion by myself, second by Vice Chair Vargas. May I ask the clerk to call forward the speakers on item 19?
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. We have 3 requests to speak on this item, 1 in person and 2 by phone. Any individuals that requested to speak by phone on item 19, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. Also note we did not receive any e-comments on this item. We'll begin with the in-person speaker in opposition to this item. I'd like to invite forward Jason Robo. He'll have 2 minutes to address the board.
Jason Robo. I find it interesting that Francis Parker School is getting $85 million. Correct me if I'm wrong about this, but that might violate the Brown Act. It's 1,300 students getting $85 million for that. That's kind of crazy. And yeah, nonprofits are a weird kind of scheme.
Robo, we're on agenda item 19.
Oh, you jumped into 19?
It was not number 19.
Oh, group fees. All right, well, I'll just decline the comment because I'm not prepared.
All right.
And now we'll hear from those that requested to speak by phone. Again, you will hear a recording that will tell you to begin your comments after the beep. And remind the callers they should mute their TV or live video stream before they begin speaking. We'll hear from our first caller.
Audra, love how you guys skip me number 18, then you just go to 19. It's so great because you can do that when we're talking on the phone. Yeah, but so I'd like to address 18 because you wouldn't allow me to. Fees for that, it's like you want to just collect any kind of money that you want for various county departments just for using credit cards, electronic payments, or debit cards. And then going into 19, the finance and general government group fees and rates relating to debt services. So it's just another way for you guys to collect the people's money, so that you don't reduce available resources that could be available to the entire region for other vital services provided by the county department. So it's your way of taking our money and using it for something else. You guys just love money. It's great. And I don't know, I kind of missed whatever was happening, but were you silencing Jason again? As we talk about free speech and whatnot, that's interesting. So anyway, I'd like to take the rest of my time to acknowledge all those who have died from the COVID vaccine. May they rest in peace.
Chair Fletcher, that concludes public comment on this item.
We have a motion by myself, second by Vice Chair Vargas. Please vote.
Chair Fletcher, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
We're going to take agenda items 20, 21, and 22 together as one item. But before we do, we had a request at our last meeting, which I think is appropriate, to give a brief update and presentation around bonds, debt bonds, revenue bonds, and other types of things that we consider as a matter of routine business before the county. So I'll turn it over to staff for a presentation.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher and members of the board. Today I'm joined by Michelle Critchlow, who is the county's debt finance manager, and she's going to present you with an overview of the Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act of 1982, commonly referred to as TEFRA, and the hearing process associated with that, focusing on the county's role in these hearings and the 3 TEFRA hearings that are on your agenda today. Michelle.
Thank you, Ebony. The TEFRA was passed in 1982, and it generally requires that a governmental bond issuer satisfy a public approval process for tax-exempt bonds for the benefit of a non-governmental entity that is funding a project that has a public benefit. The hearings that are held by this board provide the public with an opportunity to comment on the use of tax-exempt bonds for the non-governmental borrower, which would be a private, nonprofit, or for-profit entity whose project provides a public benefit. Section 147F of the Internal Revenue Code states the bonds must be approved by a governmental entity issuing the bonds or on behalf of which the bonds were issued, and by each governmental entity having jurisdiction over the area in which the bond finance facility is to be located. Before we go into each of the items that is before your board for a public hearing today, I want to take a moment to clarify the roles of the issuer, the borrower, and the county. The issuer is a governmental entity, including joint powers authorities, or JPAs, that issue bonds on behalf of non-governmental entities to fund a public benefit project. The county participates in 3 JPAs with other California counties and cities. The issuer for the TEFRA hearings before your board is not the county. The borrower is a non-governmental entity, a nonprofit or for-profit, that is looking to fund a public benefit project through tax-exempt bond proceeds. The borrower is responsible for all payments of costs in connection with the bonds. The borrower for the TEFRA hearings before your board is not the county. The county's role in this process is to hold the TEFRA hearings and allow for public comment on the use of tax-exempt bonds. The county also provides approval so the issuer of the bonds may move forward with its determination to issue bonds. The county's approval does not signify an endorsement of the project or the borrower, but is instead an approval for the limited purpose required by IRS regulations or the issuer. It should be noted that if an issuer, one of the JPAs, is seeking approval for a taxable bond financing, a TEFRA hearing is not required, only an administrative approval. Items 20, 21, and 22 are for tax-exempt financings and therefore require a TEFRA hearing. I will now provide a brief overview of the TEFRA hearings that your board is requested to conduct today. Item 20 is for the Francis Parker School, a nonprofit educational institution located in District 4. For this hearing, the issuer is a California Enterprise Development Authority. The borrower is seeking to borrow up to $85 million to refinance $49.2 million of outstanding debt, as well as to construct various campus facilities, including classrooms, a library, a gym, and administrative offices. The borrower intends to start construction in October 2022 and complete the project in January 2024. Item 21 is for Terry Inc., a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing training and educational programs for children and adults with developmental or learning disabilities. This project is located in District 5. For this hearing, the issuer is a California Enterprise Development Authority. The borrower is seeking to borrow up to $16.5 million to refinance $2.2 million of outstanding debt, as well as to construct various facilities, including an educational and career center, a fine arts building, and a performance arts center. The borrower intends to start construction in April 2022 and complete the project in March of 2023. Item 22 is for Merca Investments, a developer of affordable multi-family rental housing for the Vista Lane Family Apartments project. This project is located in District 1. For this hearing, the issuer is a California Municipal Finance Authority. The borrower is seeking to borrow up to $55 million to construct 167 units of affordable housing in San Ysidro. The borrower intends to start construction in July 2022 and complete the project in February 2024. This concludes the overview of the 3 TEFRA hearings that are before your board for consideration today. I'm happy to answer questions on the county's role in these hearings, and members of the external finance and project teams are available as well at the chair's discretion to answer project-specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Supervisor Desmond?
Thank you, Chair Fletcher, and thank you for the presentation, putting this on. So I think basically what a lot of the confusion is, and just I'm going to try to reiterate what you said in layman terms, and you did a good job, but thank you. So basically these entities, like the Francis Parker School goes to the issuer, which basically goes to the bond market and sells these bonds out in the open market, and the people who buy these bonds can earn money tax-free. They're the ones that are getting the tax-free advantage of the effort, not us, not Francis Parker. And then Francis Parker and these other entities have to pay this money back over time. So this is not county money, and I think that's where some of the confusion came up, is that these are county dollars, and we're giving $85 million to Francis Parker School. We're not. We're just the government entity that has to hold the public hearing to allow this because the bonds are tax exempt. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right. All right. Even I understand it now. But I appreciate it, and it just a lot of people don't realize that, and some of the speakers would complaining, well, this is more money you're giving away, county. It's like, it's not ours, and these people have to pay it back with a little bit of interest. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
So I'll move to approve items 19, 20, and 21.
It's 20, 21, and 22.
Those two.
20, 21, and 22. Thank you, Supervisor Desmond. And we have a second by Vice Chair Barker. So let me ask the clerk to call forward the speakers on these items.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. We have 5 requests to speak on items 20, 21, and 22. We also did not receive any comments on these items. Any individuals that requested to speak by phone on items 20, 21, or 22, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We'll begin with the in-person speakers. All speakers are in opposition to these items. As your name is called, please come forward and stand against the east wall under the murals until it is your turn to speak. I'd like to invite forward Jason Robo and Mark Dorian. And Jason, since you requested to speak on all 3 items, you will be provided 6 minutes for your comments.
Thank you. Jason Robo, as I was saying before, Francis Parker School money, is that one of the ones, or 1920? Yeah, all right. It's $85 million for 1,300 students, which sounds a little bit ridiculous to me, and this is a nonprofit, and there's a guy named Norman Dodd. He was the chief investigator in 1953 for the Special Committee on Tax-Exempt Foundations, commonly referred to as the Reese Committee. That was eventually twisted into the witch trials that became McCarthyism, but basically Dodd, through his research, implicated that the Carnegie Endowment, this is from Wikipedia too, which is pretty censorious. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Ford Foundation, and Obama is a Ford descendant, and the Rockefeller Foundation, among many others, were implicated. He stated in his findings that many foundations were intentionally campaigning to involve the United States in such wars as World War I, and that they also sought ways to warp American teaching of history through explicit control of the education system in the United States. So I'm speaking on this because how it relates to the nonprofit system. Renee Wormser, who was legal counsel to the Reese Committee, wrote in his book 1958 on the subject that it is difficult for the public to understand that some of the great foundations which have done so much for us in some fields have acted tragically against the public interest in others, but the facts are there for the unprejudiced to recognize. There is a legendary interview that was shortly before his death that Dodd did with G. Edward Griffin, who's the author of the book The Creature from Jekyll Island, which is about our financial system and how the Federal Reserve System was created in secret on Jekyll Island, which I think is a funny place to have a hideout. Anybody get the pun? Probably not paying attention. Anyways, a bunch of the industrialist bankers got together and they conspired to create the Federal Reserve before it was approved, and they met in secret. And that was actually, I think, maybe second to last, if not the last place where slaves were imported. So that's kind of a fun history there. But anyways, G. O. Griffin asked Dodd at the end of the interview, why do these foundations generously support communist causes in the United States? Dodd answered, to them, communism represents a means of developing what we call a monopoly, as the organization will say, of large-scale industry into an administratable unit. And yeah, administration is your expertise. And yeah, apparently most of that's not listening. I mean, you look at me sometimes, you look at me most of the time. And yeah, I think that there is a thing about parliamentary procedure when you're addressed that you should have a right to reply. And by the way, first time I've had a warning was just now, besides the fact that Nora cut me off previously. So I've never yelled out of turn except when I was addressed in such fashion. So. But anyways, yeah, I didn't know I was going to get 6 minutes at once, but yeah, the FCC abandoned the fairness doctrine, which repealed personal attack political editorial rules, so that's convenient, so legally that benefits you. Let's look some more at this Gio Griffin interview about tax-exempt foundations. There was an investigator named Catherine Casey, and she was skeptical that there was anything amiss with these nonprofits, which, by the way, they were created before taxes. So basically the elite, like the Carnegies and whatnot, they made, not that you guys care, but the audience does maybe, that they made tax-exempt foundations as a wealth shelter for the elite, and then they made taxes on everyone else. And then when they made taxes on people, before they made tax-exempt foundations, they said they were only for the rich, and that's totally been flipped. And another great, I like to reference stuff so people can actually learn shit from when I'm up here rambling about stuff, is Perfectly Legal is a book. I think his name's Jonathan Perkins, maybe is the author. He wrote a book called The Making of Donald Trump, which is a good one too. I'm not a Trumper. You guys try to call me anti-vaxxer sometimes, but I'm not a Trumper either. That one breaks down how he came in. Oh, Hypernormalization, that's a great documentary about him as well. Anyways, point being is that Perfectly Legal talks about how the tax system was made to, you know, supposedly tax the rich, but it's been twisted. So let's see. Catherine Casey actually became concerned. What she did was called spot check. So she like selectively cherry picked random, you know, meetings. And so what they were discussing in these meetings, which I, you know, talked about earlier with a Wikipedia quote, was that the elite we're trying to figure out through the Ford Foundation circle, at least, they were saying that, like, what's the best way to manipulate the population and outside of war? And so we have a COVID war now. We had a war on terror before, which opened the door to front and back open funding of nonsense. But they decided that war actually is the best way to manipulate the population. And so they concluded that, well, what's the best way to start wars? And that's to control education. And I mean, there's a really perverted, weird thing going on with education right now, particularly also like this LGBT, like whatnot. Like I said before, I respect everybody's like way of life, but there's all sorts of things going on, like chemicals and plastic stuff. I can't remember the name of this lady. I listened to her on Joe Rogan, but she has a book called Counting Down or Countdown about how the sperm counts are lowering, but also because the plastics are making genitals smaller in men and the size of the taint gets smaller. It's really weird stuff. But anyways, it just seems like very relevant, and that's the way I view the world. And yeah, it might seem obscene and absurd to some people, but yeah. I mean, when we use crude language, people say shit and fuck, and they say they're pissed off, you know, like, so I feel like that those are things that drive the point home. But anyways, this lady, Catherine Casey, she concluded at the end of her document checking that basically that they were doing evil, maniacal stuff. And so yeah, don't trust nonprofits and screw the government if they're going to be evil.
Next speaker, please.
Thank you for being polite for 5.5 minutes. Thanks.
For the next speaker, Mark Dorian, you request to speak on item 22, so you'll have 2 minutes.
Mark Dorian, I realize you guys aren't too interested, but for anybody who might be watching, Rosa Corey did a really, really good 26-minute long monologue on this. If you look on YouTube, her video is entitled Rosa Corey, R-O-S-A. Corey is K-O-I-R-E, Part 1. The real titles are longer, but there's Part 1, 2, 3, and 4. I highly recommend 1. She was a branch chief manager for, a branch district chief for the Department of Transportation. Her expertise, she could be an expert court witness, one of the people who get maybe $10,000 for an hour in court, because her specialty was land use and property valuation. She wrote a book and did several videos. You don't have to buy the book. You can just see the videos. They detail her experience seeing how our government and our planning commission was completely changed, which is how this refers to any of these buildings. projects that you guys are doing is they're all Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, Sustainable Development, the Green New Deal. They keep changing the name. It's all UN Agenda for the 21st century, and it's not a joke. It's not made up. And if you look at the video, she'll tell you about it, and then you'll understand what the people in front of you here are doing. Again, that's Rosa Corey, Koire. So many things that Jason was saying are true, and it's good to hear when he's so intelligent when he's not joking around. He is a comedian, you know. So anyway, you guys have a great day, and I hope the people watching check those videos out so they have a clue as to what you're doing.
Thank you. We'll now hear from those that requested to speak by phone on items 20, 21, and 22. When it is your turn to speak, you'll be unmuted, and you will hear a recording that will tell you to begin your comments after the beep. I'll remind the callers they should mute their TV or live video stream before they begin speaking. Begin with our first caller, identified as Truth, who requested to speak on item 20, so you'll be provided 2 minutes.
Okay, Truth. Regarding item 20, those running Francis Parker School Linda Vista have to be incredibly inept if they can't realize that the borrowing amount of $85 million could easily buy 10 brand new state-of-the-art nonprofit schools at the cost of only $8,500,000 each instead. Or how about only 2 brand new schools at $8,500,000, and all the rest of the millions could be put to scholarships? Something about their math skills is very lacking. But, you know, that would all make too much financial sense. The California Enterprise Development Authority says, bring on the debt. So just a few personal notes for the rest of my time. Ryan, from the Gallup Project, you made excellent points on the working groups. Keep in mind the participants are handpicked ahead of time so as to not have any dissenters. And Audra, your proclamation award will be hand-delivered one day. Also, lastly, Nathan, I understand your frustrations. I do. But because you're not a licensed and certified medical professional, you should not be making any psychological diagnosis of any speaker at these meetings. Try to keep that in mind. Thanks, Mr. Potter.
Thank you. We'll now hear from the next caller. Next caller is Audra, who requested to speak on items 20, 21, and 22, so you'll be provided 6 minutes.
Audra, that you guys hate giving me 6 minutes, but that's cool. Anyway, yeah, so you guys want to give $85 million to, you're going to allow this to go to these nonprofit organizations, and $49.2 million of that is for debt. And they want to then basically use the rest of it for 1,300 students. It's like $27,538 per student. And if they want to complete all of this in 2024, I mean, are they really going to do that if they're already in debt and have issues with that? And again, so then you go to the next one. It's they're getting $16.5 million, and they're already $2.2 million in debt that this is going to take care of. So is there going to be any training and educational programs that actually are able to be utilized? I feel like all of these things, none of these projects get completed. If these people are already in debt, how are they going to complete the projects that they want to in such a short time? And for 22, it's like $55 million for 167 units. Do you know that's $329,341 per unit? But it's supposed to be affordable housing. So what is that going to cost these families to actually live there? That's what I would like to know. And if there's only they need to be completed in 2 years, not even 2 years, almost a year and a half. That doesn't even seem feasible. That means they would get 2% of these units actually completed. So that's 3.4 units out of 167. You guys are really on track. But you know how we get the county back on track is by electing a sheriff that will actually uphold his oath in the Constitution and the rights of the citizens. And the only person willing to do that name is Jonathan Peck. Jonathan Peck for SDSheriff.com is how you can find out about him. And he's going to be the one to get the county back on track where it should be now, where it should have been a long time ago and way before this pandemic.
If you could direct them back to agenda item.
No, it's not. It is. Because I'm talking about why that's happening. Okay? So it does have to do with that. And if this person is the only person that's going to uphold the Constitution and keep you guys upheld to your oath, that's the only way things change in the county. So, yeah, I mean, because all you guys want to do is destroy it. You don't care about the people. You don't care how much money that you guys put into different, buckets and whatnot. You act like what you're doing is actually helping people when, in fact, it isn't. I mean, the epidemiologists in San Diego have caused more harm than good with the data that they've collected. So any kind of, agenda item that you guys bring up is always flawed. It's always corrupt. It always puts more money into your pocket while taking money from the people, and it isn't really spent on things that are going to preserve the county and make it better. I mean, you act like you want to help these people with building units and getting them homes, but in reality, none of that is ever happening. You guys continue to spend money, but then you need more and more money just to complete projects that you don't. So, I mean, the whole just everything that you guys are doing is against your oath, and the fact that these people served you today against your bonds, I mean, you silenced them in doing that, which is totally, like, you should be accepting that and say, you know what, let me do whatever I can to make sure that I'm upholding my oath and doing the duties of my job. But the sad thing is that it's like a big old circle jerk, because you sit there and it's like, if you want anything from county council, the county council actually in his employment contract has to refer to the board. So if the county council then has to refer to the board, but you referred to county council, you guys are going in a big circle and nothing ever really gets taken care of. So that's why I'm saying a sheriff that is constitutional and one that will uphold that and his oath is the only way things are going to get back to normal. Every other sheriff that is running has refused to sign a constitutional contract to say that they will do that. So if you guys don't vote for Jonathan Peck, nothing will change in this county. Jonathan Peck for sheriff, 2022. Please vote. Your provisional ballots or your stinking ballots will be mailed out on May 9th. And you guys need to take it into the voting locations on the day of voting, which is June 7th. Make sure you take your ballot that you were given for a mail-in, rip up the envelope, and put in the ballot into the ballot box. Don't let them put it into one of the machines that are totally corrupted, because that is not the way that things are going to happen. They want you to use those mail-in ballots so they can decide your vote for you. It's time for us to take the county back. Nobody should be wasting time listening to these people thinking that they're going to change stuff. I mean, people ask me all the time, did they take us out of an emergency? No, they didn't. Want to know why? Because all they care about is money. That's the only thing that they're concerned about. Jim and Joel, you say you want to vote us out of an emergency, but you keep everything that has to do with the emergency in place, and that is a problem. I mean, you guys just need to get back on track because you're on the wrong side of history. And if you don't start changing your vote and voting to keep everything from the emergency out of this county, you will not win over the people because you're not on the side of the people. And this new sheriff that will be implemented is going to hold you guys accountable because nobody else is going to.
Chair Fletcher, that concludes public comment on items 20, 21, and 22.
Got a motion by Supervisor Desmond, seconded by Vice Chair Vargas to approve items 20, 21, 22. Please vote.
Chair Fletcher, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
At each board meeting, I ask my colleagues if they want to provide a update, report on progress, or share any pertinent information on board committee reports or updates from other organizations they are a part of. Ask if anyone has anything they would like to share. Not seeing anyone, we will move to our adjournments in memory. The first adjournment, we have 3 today. The first will be from Supervisor Desmond, honoring Bob Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to adjourn today's meeting in memory of 93-year-old Escondido native, developer, and philanthropic icon, Robert Bob Wilson, who passed away in his sleep on January 24th. Bob Wilson built 63 shopping centers, and he launched the Fish Market restaurant chain. He loved opportunities to share his fortune with charity, and his favorite local causes were helping the homeless, farm workers, and foster children. Bob rarely sought publicity for his charitable efforts, but one of the few places that does bear his name is the Wilson Plaza at his alma mater, UCLA, because he chaired a successful $3.2 billion campaign. But one of Mr. Wilson's most famous charitable efforts was the gift of $1.1 million in individual $1,000 checks to students and faculty at Paradise High School following a devastating wildfire that razed the entire town of Paradise in 2018. Bob will be dearly missed, and we send our deepest condolences to his entire family. Thank you.
Thank you. Today we adjourn in memory and remember the life of Annette Baumann. Annette was born in Barbados, West Indies on August 4th, 1937, into a large family of 4 sisters and 2 brothers by her mother Sybil and her father Victor. Annette always credited her mother for giving her the strength to pursue her dream of a larger life beyond the small Caribbean island. After graduating from the Covenant School for Girls in St. Michael, Barbados, she immigrated to New York City to live with her older sister, Gloria, and studied to be an X-ray technician. It was there she met and married the love of her life, Fred Baumann, a third-year medical student at NYU who would go on to become a renowned neurologist. Annette and Fred were married on June 11, 1960, and early in their marriage, she earned her American citizenship with the help of her children, who helped her study for her citizenship exam. In 1975, the family moved west to California and settled in El Cajon, where she and Fred raised their 3 children, John, Lisa, and Dwayne. Annette's lifelong passion was her support for and belief in the humanitarian mission of the United Nations, promoting their life-changing work around peace and educating children throughout the world. In 1985, Annette joined the board of directors of the United Nations Association of San Diego County. One of Annette's signature achievements there was her 12-year commitment to the children of El Cajon, by playing a key role in organizing and judging an American history essay contest in conjunction with the city's annual International Friendship Festival. For 2 decades, the festival would culminate with an American citizenship naturalization ceremony, like the one Annette had participated in decades before, for hundreds of immigrants from across the globe. In 1998, before retiring from the UNA board and after 20 years of service, Annette became the first recipient of the Carol and Nona Cannon Outstanding UNA Membership Award. On her birthday in 2003, her son Dwayne established the Annette Baumann Scholarship Fund of the UNASD to grant $10,000 a year in Annette's honor to brighten the future of low-income, college-bound San Diego County student members of the Model UN program. Annette left the world a much better place than she found it. We send our deepest condolences to her husband of 62 years, Fred, their children Lisa, John, and Dwayne, their 3 grandchildren, and to all of the people whose lives she touched so much. Today we adjourn our Board of Supervisors meeting in memory of a true American hero, Brigadier General Robert Bob Cardenas. The greatest generation is leaving us in record numbers, and it is really important that we recognize the tremendous role that they play in our society. General Cardenas' impressive military career included World War II bombing missions in Europe. He was a test pilot in multiple aircraft, an aerospace pioneer, and a jet fighter squadron commander in Vietnam. General Cardenas earned the Armed Forces Distinguished Service Medal, the Legion of Merit with Oak Leaf Cloister, the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Purple Heart, Meritorious Service Medal, a Presidential Citation, and many, many other awards. Brigadier General Bob Cardenas died on March 10th, which was his 102nd birthday. I was very fortunate in my life to have the opportunity to know and work with General Cardenas, to have conversations with him, to watch his incredible civic leadership and the way that he carried himself. And it was a life that we should truly lift up and celebrate. An immigrant, General Cardenas was born in Yucatan, Mexico in 1920. When he was 5 years old, he and his family moved to San Diego. He attended San Diego High, where he excelled in math and physics. At the same time in high school, he developed an interest in aviation by building models and learning about the gliders at the Torrey Pines Glider Port. In 1939, while attending San Diego State University, Bob Cardenas enlisted in the California National Guard. In July of 1941, he was commissioned a 2nd lieutenant in the Army Air Corps, just as American involvement in World War II was about to begin. He was stationed in Europe, where he flew B-24s as a part of the 44th Bomber Group known as the Flying Eight Balls. In March of 1944, on his 20th mission, he was shot down over an air armament factory in Germany. Wounded, but never one to give up, General Cardenas swam across a lake and was saved from drowning by a fisherman who brought him to neutral Switzerland. He was detained there until he escaped to France, later to England with the help of Swiss civilians and the French resistance. After World War II, General Cardenas became a test pilot. In 1947, he was the command pilot of the aircraft that famously launched Chuck Yeager's Bell X-1 into supersonic flight. Yeager went on to great fame, but Cardenas went relatively unnoticed. However, that never bothered him. As his son Bob told the UT, he just did his job. He wouldn't tell you about all the things he had accomplished unless you asked. Bob Cardenas was vocal about many things, defending our veterans, supporting our community, his love of his family, but he also was the pioneer and leader between the need to establish a national cemetery at Miramar. Recognizing that Rosecrans was becoming full, he worked tirelessly to ensure that San Diego veterans and families had a place for those who had served our nation to rest after they had died. In the years up to the Miramar National Cemetery's open in 2010, he worked tirelessly to make it a reality. This accomplishment was so important to him that he will be buried at Miramar instead of Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia. In 2008, Bob Cardenas was inducted in the International Air and Space Hall of Fame. A statue of General Cardenas wearing a flight helmet stands on a pedestal in front of the Veterans Museum at Balboa Park, along with statues of the B-24, which he pioneered and led. We send our deepest condolences to Brigadier General Bob Cardenas' wife, their 7 children, and their 19 grandchildren. The country is a much better place thanks to his presence and his service. We adjourn today's meeting in memory of Brigadier General Bob Cardenas. With that, we will return to our non-agendized public speakers.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. We have 28 remaining requests to speak on items not listed on the agenda, 18 in person and 10 by phone. For those that requested to speak by phone, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We'll begin with the in-person speakers. As your name is called, please come forward and stand against the east wall under the murals until it is your turn to speak. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board. I'd like to invite forward the following individuals: Mike Borrello, Andrew Prakash, Mary D., Audra, Summer Boger, Freedom Love, Jeff Weitzman, Mirel Poor, Ryan, Kathleen Melanakis, Brian Melanakis, Catherine Neubauer, Mary Kay Panek, Jason Robo, Mark Dorian, Consuelo, Tasha Williamson, and Dean Spooner. If I've called your name, please come forward.
Andrew Prakash. Never let a debt-ridden, morally confused individual obtain a position of power because they're too vulnerable to corruption. Nora Vargas, you are the perfect example as you walk out. You use your own people for your own gain, and they will eventually see the truth in you. All things will come to light. Never let a person who makes decisions controlled by their emotions obtain a position of power. Tara Lawson, you are the perfect example. Crying in that seat to stir emotions in people is not something any supervisor should do. I said this before and I'll say this again. They're not your kids. Also, here's another warning from above for your soul. You condemn yourself by using the Bible for your arguments when you can't see the context of what God is saying. You don't represent the Spirit of God, and we know the devil knows the word too. Never let Judas run the money. Unless you're Jesus, then you got a plan. Nathan, you've betrayed your own. The dollars won't save you. The hair won't save you. The higher powers of this world won't save you either. And understand that their power cowers in fear to our power, that is the Holy Spirit. Jim and Joel, I have no comment for you because I don't spread misinformation. I hope you will conduct yourselves with some integrity, some moral compass, and we the people will do the rest. Jim, I am rooting for you, and I just bought a house in Oceanside to show my money is where my mouth is. And I did it on my own dime and not the people's, Nora. Understand that I find no joy in coming here to insult you, and that is not my intention. I do not care what you think, and I do not speak on my own accord. I speak the truth unapologetically and without fear. The blood of the Lamb covers all, but you have to go and take your destructive policies with you. Find something else to do because you don't belong in those seats and you're not fit to lead. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Jason Robo, I wanted to address some of the people that call in every week that talk trash about cannabis. Well, first of all, the opiate epidemic is mainly not just because of the nonsense that the pharmaceuticals companies have promoted recently, but because cannabis prohibition. So originally it was made illegal using racism, which I've mentioned before, which you say I'm racist when I'm very conscious of what racism really is. It's very vile. Is a psychotic Mexican bloodthirsty rapist. That's how that started. So if you want to attack cannabis, but you're upset about the opium epidemic, then you're a moron. And by the way, I was a chair. Nathan, you know about my origin story a little bit. I doubt you'd ever sit in the same room with me, let alone in public with a camera, because you wouldn't have any excusable response to anything I have to say, but I'm a political scientist as well. But the ACLU and the local chapter of the International Women's Voters League decried that I was illegally removed from student office at Humboldt State University, and I was removed from the election within the same period of a handful of weeks. And one of my opponents was actually the one who filed a complaint about that nonsense. And the person who I beat to get into that chair office originally was Wes Chesbrough's son, Alan. So. Who's an assembly person, state senator and whatnot. Anyways, yeah, I find it interesting how you guys usually don't look at us. I think that we should have a picture-in-picture where it like shows you guys in the background at least in a small image. I don't know who to talk to about that, but you won't respond because that's a Brown Act violation bullshit. Oh, and then the ladies talking about weed candy being bad. They should be worried about candy in general, and that's also idiocy. And yeah, not making it clap or not allowing us to clap is nonsense, but I don't know. I wanted to address, I'm running out of time. Lemur, you just coughed and sneezed into your hand, like not in the corner of your elbow if you really care about disease. And it's National Deep Dish Pizza Day, Flash Drive, and Read a Roadmap Day, and Google using it ruins your brains.
We'll now hear from those that requested to speak by phone. When it is your turn to speak, you will be unmuted and you will hear a recording that will tell you to begin your comments after the beep. I'll remind the callers that they should mute their TV or live video stream before they begin speaking. We'll hear from our first caller.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Kathleen Lippitt. As a public health practitioner and advocate of sound drug policies, I'd like to share some thoughts on the recent Washington Times editorial board article. Their perspectives on the potential of expanding marijuana availability nationally are relevant to this county's support of the marijuana industry. The editorial points out that the public will be forced to cope with the surge of violence associated with marijuana cultivation and retail sales. It concludes by reminding that rationalizing reclassifying vices as virtues won't make communities safer or healthier, which is exactly what the county did with its marijuana ordinance to grow a predatory commercial marijuana industry when it titled the Massive Marijuana Cannabis Equity Framework for the Future. The county has diverted attention and funding from effective, affordable, and sustainable prevention and drug demand reduction programs that decrease drug use and postpone or prevent early drug initiation. Ingratiating yourselves to the marijuana industry disregards the costs and harm to the environment and the health, safety, and welfare of those you serve, especially youth and young adults. Concern for the viability and profitability of an industry with a goal of maximizing addiction is misplaced. If you are sincere about mental health, please do not ignore root causes that contribute to mental health problems. Please do not ignore warnings from the CDC or the Surgeon General regarding mental health dangers of marijuana. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Spooner, we do have a speaker slip for you if you'd like to come up.
I'm sorry. My name is Dean Spooner. I'm a Vietnam veteran, married, grew up in Lemon Grove, I've seen a lot of transition in San Diego from a sleepy little naval town to what it is now. I don't know how to describe it. I want to thank the County Board of Supervisors that stayed to hear public comment from the public. I've had a lot of problems with County Board of Supervisors. Some of you have phones that if you call it, it hangs up on you because it's full. That's serving the public. Okay, so I represent the old boomers who are not techies and don't do computer stuff. Government wants you to go to the computer. Go to the computer. I have problems with my handicapped daughter. She was born handicapped. I believe it was Agent Orange related, but my idea doesn't count. The VA's rejected it. The only thing VA recognizes is spinal bifida in children. That's it. Okay, now, Section 8, I'll be back tomorrow to talk about that, but you know, Section 8 office is only open on rainy days. Okay, so I submitted my yearly packet for my daughter, which is 22 pages, a day late. And 2.5 months later, I get a notice that our Section 8 is canceled because we didn't file. My daughter got the same thing, so everybody's traumatized. So you go to Section 8 and they don't answer the phone. They don't return calls. I finally had to go down there, and fortunately enough, it was a rainy day, and I got to go in, and they told me, no, it's not on the computer, you didn't file. I demanded to see a supervisor, stayed there for an hour and a half. A guy finally came down, he found it. I requested a written receipt showing that I did submit it on that date, and I guess I'm done. I'll talk some more tomorrow.
Thank you. We'll now go back to the callers.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Oh, good, thank you. This is Kelly McCormick. I'm a public health educator, and I would like to share new research published by the Journal of the American Medical Association regarding the significant amount of secondhand smoke resulting from the use of a marijuana bong. While some may view this study as stating the obvious, there are serious health implications, since the pollution from bongs is even greater than that produced by smoking tobacco through a hookah pipe. The study utilized a real-world scenario of measuring the secondhand smoke in an apartment after the tenants used a bong for marijuana. The emission levels measured 5 to 10 times higher than the EPA threshold for hazardous air pollution. In addition, these higher air pollutant levels persisted for at least 2 hours after the smoking ceased. The ultrafine particles in secondhand smoke compromise the functioning of blood vessels and lungs, increasing the risk of heart disease and lung disease. Other studies have found that more people end up in emergency rooms on days with high ultrafine air pollution. This study and others underscore the need for county action to support public health, including education on the harmful effects of secondhand marijuana smoke and a ban on smoking and vaping in multi-unit housing complexes. Secondhand marijuana smoke has the potential to cause significant disease. Marijuana smoking should be included with cigarettes in clean indoor air policies. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from our next caller.
Amber Long. I don't know how else to say this, but it's honestly pretty bad out here. If there was ever a time to say no and stand on your freedom, the freedom you were given, it is now. The lies will never end, and the pandemic will never end because they will never want it to. I understand how hard change is when you start to realize the lies around you within our society. Everything does change. Your whole self changes. You may lose friends or family or a job, and you may lose a lot of things that you may care for and take comfort in, but to me, it's worth it. because I would rather lose all of that than lose myself. I am not speaking today because I want to be, or because I was made to be, or because I was paid to be. I am speaking now because I have a moral obligation. I am here because every fiber of my being is screaming at me to get up and stand for what's right. And you should too. I am here speaking because I know what the future will look like if we stay on this path. But I am also here because I know what the future could look like if we stood together in unity instead of the division implemented by those sworn in to protect us. The time for you to stand up is now. Stand with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Now hear from the next caller.
Audra. So I second what, oh my gosh, Amber says, because it's so true that we need to understand that we are, sovereign beings, that we don't have to be under the rule of these people. But if we sit by and watch them do this and do nothing about it, then we are, kind of playing the game and allowing these things to continue when we should be putting a stop to them. The Constitution is in place for a reason. I mean, couldn't be more important than a time like this where, if you think back to when our forefathers were, putting these things together for us for a time like this, that if we don't do our part and preserve these things and help the future generations that come after us, all these children are being brainwashed. I mean, they don't even, all the mental health issues are caused by all of these policies, and they're unable to really see another way of living. And if we don't show them the way and get them out of the predicament that they're in, that the future that we have is not very bright. So I urge all of you to understand that we have to understand our rights, that you need to look into the Constitution so that you understand when your rights are being taken from you. I mean, they talk about discrimination, and all they want to do is discriminate against everybody in the county, which, all by claiming that they're trying to protect them. I mean, but they're silencing people, they're killing people, they refuse to stop implementing all of these policies that are destroying the county while they're claiming that they're protecting it. And we can all see that that's not what's going on. So I just urge every one of you to start paying attention and start fighting for your rights before, we get to a place where they already want to use military equipment to come against the people. They want to take our guns. It's up to us to actually stand up against it and say that we're not going to play the game anymore.
Thank you. We'll now hear from the next caller.
Ann Riddle. I came this afternoon to share an observation that I made about this morning's honorees for proclamations. This is a part of the Board of Supervisors meeting that I really enjoy. This morning you mentioned the county's epidemiologists, and you thanked them for their work in gathering data and distributing data. And I had a really good experience with one of the epidemiologists 3 years ago who came to speak to parents and public health educators regarding EVALI and the loss of young people's lives, teens and young adults, primarily under 25. And EVALI stands for e-cigarettes or vaping associated with lung injuries. And before COVID, this was of grave concern. It still is, of course. And it spoke to the issue of lung damage due to the vaping and the use of e-cigs, whether it be tobacco or marijuana. And at that time, the epidemiologist told me something that I used in my own family and that I used in public health and with parents. He said the lungs are only meant to do two things. One, take in oxygen. Two, give off carbon dioxide. They are not meant to take in any other item like tobacco, marijuana, other drugs. And it's to that issue I expressed my concern from a public health and parent point of view. The idea of expanding the footprint of marijuana businesses across the unincorporated area in the county is most unfortunate. This is not the time to further public health issues, especially those who sell products that can harm our lungs and otherwise make our health compromised. Thank you for this opportunity to share this perception.
Thank you. Now hear from our next caller.
Hi, Mary D. here. So I had to do this by teleconferencing, so I just drove home. Luckily, the meeting is still going. I just wanted to ask you to please rethink your whole speaker slip system. There's a lot of problems with it. It's a barrier to democracy. For one thing, too, I don't think a lot of people, even though it kind of is in there in the middle saying it's public record, I found a whole parcel full in my research, and I don't think these people know that their home address is being made public. So if you're going to continue speaker slips, at least take that part off of there. There's really no reason for it. And then the other reason would be to get rid of it completely. Again, it's a barrier. It delays. You didn't even open the chamber until like literally 3 minutes or a minute before the meeting started, after 1 o'clock when it should have started. So that was a barrier. And then also, I think City of San Diego, as well as I believe National City, is looking at getting rid of. City of San Diego has no slips at all, and National City is looking at getting rid of the slips, is my understanding. But they are a barrier, and there's really, in the modern age, no reason for them. So I would ask you to revise that rule as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And Chair Fletcher, that concludes the request for non-agenda public communication today.
Thank you. The board will reconvene in closed session. With that, we stand adjourned.
The board will now recess into closed session and consider those matters listed under item 23 on today's agenda. If there are any reportable actions, they will be reported out during the planning and land use session of this meeting tomorrow, Wednesday, April 6, 2022.